be sure and hit that like button when you come into the live stream. By hitting that like button, we'll get more people to join in on this YouTube live stream video so that we can have a better discussion down in the comments section. Today, we're going to be talking about the inequality that has taken place within the United States, the haves versus the have-nots. I left a link down in the description to a couple of articles, three of them. One of them talking about how the luxurious experiences of the ultra wealthy elite are buying homes in the Hamptons like there's no tomorrow. So it's a booming economy in the Hamptons when it comes to real estate, as the rich elite are just continuing to do their spending like normal, if not increasing it dramatically, and there's no better proof of it than the luxurious experiences of being able to buy some of the most expensive homes in some of the most expensive neighborhoods. So seeing that as being the case, it shows how the inequality is really growing. Most people are suffering from the consequences of a position in this economy that even a good job is not enough to buy a home. In fact, I was looking at the average or the income needed for a single person to live comfortably in every state. I left a link down in the description to that one. And it's almost $100,000. Like the cheapest state was like $80,000 for a single person to live comfortably. And some of the more expensive states were well over 100, up into the 120 plus $1,000. And I think about it, it's like the average income is like it's like less than $50,000. So to live comfortably in this country is like essentially almost impossible for the average person. Like it's just not going to be the case. And think about it, if you're trying to raise a family, how hard that is. So here it is. I'm one of these people, working class, average, everyday dude, working a day job, an hourly day job. I live in the 10th most expensive place in the United States for populations of 10 to 50,000. And I think about how difficult it is to actually make it here. It's very difficult. If I didn't have a YouTube channel, if I didn't have side hustles, if my wife wasn't working, I couldn't live in this area. It's too expensive. It's far too expensive to live here. And to understand why this is the case is probably going to be the most important thing that you can do to understand what it is that you need to do in your situation, considering that nobody lives the same economy. Every single person has a different family, has a different background, has a different skill set, has a different education, has a different place in life that they're going to be needing to position themselves, and to understand what it is that's happening right now that's creating this situation is very important. So I look back to none other than Cantillon essay on economic theory. There's a link down in the description to this exact essay that you can buy off of Amazon, but you do not have to buy the essay off of Amazon. You can go get it for free at the Mises Institute just by typing in Cantillon essay on economic theory. Go and check out and see what the essay is by clicking on that Amazon affiliate link. I will get a little commission if you buy that essay off of Amazon, but you do not have to buy the essay. You can go to Mises Institute to get it for free. By clicking on that link, you will give me the opportunity to get a little commission off of everything that you put in your cart for the next 24 hours after clicking on that link. So again, that's an easy way to support the Uneducated Economist. If you go to that essay, go to chapter 6 of part 2. Part 2, chapter 6, the increase and decrease of money to the state, increase and decrease of the quantity of money in the state. There we go. And starting in this chapter, it really begins to describe the deterioration of the economy due to the increase of money. It's the increase of money that is the reason why we have the booming economy and also the separation between the rich and the poor. And the more that new money pours in, the worse it gets. Now, although the new money coming in can benefit quite a few people out there, most of the time when we experience the new money, as it's coming in for the first time, everybody enjoys it. Everybody gets to experience the new money coming in. But as the separation grows worse, the new money coming in makes it more of a painful experience. All right, so thank you all for joining in. We got 84 people watching with 26 likes. Be sure and hit that like button. All right. Your views and perspectives are appreciated with respect. Well, thank you very much, G. Lauro. I really appreciate the comments, and thank you for keep commenting on that. It'll also help the algorithm to bring this video to more people's attention. All right. So in this chapter, the increase and decrease of the quantity of money in the state, here Cantillon uses his price specie flow mechanism to analyze some of the effects of inflation. Increasing the supply of money by mining hurts some people and benefits others because certain prices and incomes rise faster than others. However, if the new money is accumulated and saved by those who successfully export goods, either because of superior quality or more efficient transportation, it will lead to a higher standard of living. So now this is important to understand because remember, Cantillon wrote this stuff hundreds of years ago. Like this is not anywhere near to the current timeline. This was a long time ago. And although he talks about horses and wagons and bringing in new money through a mining operation, it's not different from the underlying economic forces that play out today. Like there's no difference in the underlying economic forces. The situation, the conditions, all that stuff changes. And even with technology, the complications through communications and everything else that happens does create an obvious difference as far as the economy. But again, if you recognize the underlying economic forces, all this stuff starts to make sense, especially like why it is that the luxurious purchases of the ultra wealthy elite are now increasing as opposed to decreasing, while everybody else is suffering the consequences of having to have a standard of living or a comfortable standard of living, having an income that's well above the median, right? Okay, so in this chapter, and I'm going to start breaking some of this stuff down, and you're going to recognize these underlying economic forces as they play out. So let's start reading through some of this essay. It says, if the gold or silver mines were found in a state. Now, think about the gold and silver mines. We're going to already break it down from the very first words that come in here. Think about the gold and silver mines as the central banking system, injecting new money into the economy. See, back in the day, Cantillon really didn't have a central banking system. They did have, receipts that they could write, paper receipts that could be used as currency. But the money wasn't printed into existence. It came from hard money. It came from gold and silver, right? Okay. And not always, but in this case, this is what he's going to use for the example. And we can share in the example by replacing the silver mine with the central banking system. If gold and silver mines were found in a state and considerable quantities of minerals were extracted from them, the owners of these mines, the entrepreneurs, and all those who work there will increase their expenditures in proportion to the wealth and profit they make. So these new industrious people getting the new money, right? So they're essentially going and getting it out of the ground. They're producing the new money. They get to enjoy it first, right? As soon as they get to spend it, everybody else gets access to it. But they have to go and get it first, and once they get it, they have to spend it. So, okay, will increase their expenditures in proportion to the wealth and profit they make. They will also lend the money they have over and above what they need for expenses and interest and earn interest. Now, this is also important to understand that once they have accumulated money, buy the things that they need, what do they do with that money? Right? Capital investment. They put it into something that's going to have an interest of or a return of interest. Okay? And again, right? Cantillon recognized this hundreds of years ago. All this money, whether lent or spent, will enter into circulation and will not fail to raise the price of commodities and goods in all the channels of circulation it enters. See, it wasn't necessarily just the going and accumulation of the money. You can go and get it. It's spending it into the economy that creates the inflationary scenario. Right? Now, increased money will bring about increased expenditures, and this will cause an increase of market prices in goods years. Oh, I'm sorry. Will increase. Oh, Jesus. Okay. Increased money will bring about increased expenditures, and this will cause an increase of market prices in the good years and to a lesser degree in the bad years. Now, again, this is important to understand that the increase of money is what increases the expenditures. Those increase of expenditures is what's creating the inflationary pressures. It's supply and demand imbalances that are created. It's not just the accumulation of money. It's the accumulation of money and then spending it or lending it into the economy. This is what starts creating the circulation of money and then the supply demand imbalances that come from it. Everybody agrees that the abundance of money or the increase in its use in exchange raises the prices of everything. This truth is substantiated in experience by the quantity of money brought to Europe from the America for the last 2 centuries. Mr. Locke lays it down as fundamental maximum that the quantity of goods is proportion to the quantity of money regulator of the market is a regulator of the market prices. Sorry, guys. So ultimately, the quantity of money in proportion to the quantity of goods and services that are out there. I have tried to elucidate. I'm not sure. He uses, there's some words in here, and like, I'm the uneducated economist. Some things that I just, I'm like, what the hell is he saying? Elucidate his idea that preceding the chapters, he has clearly seen that the abundance of money makes everything more expensive, but he has not considered how this happens. The great difficulty of this question consists in knowing in what way and what proportion the increase of money raises the prices of things. So now this is where it gets really interesting, because so many people just want to take on the consideration that if you increase the money, increase the supply of money, you will increase the prices of everything. And this is a simple, easy understanding of inflation. And like, you can literally wipe your hand clean of understanding it any differently. But then when somebody may ask you the question, well, why didn't quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 fail to produce the inflationary scenario the Fed was looking for? And since most people do not understand why it is that this didn't happen, why the quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failed to produce the inflationary scenario, they can't explain it, then the whole money printer idea kind of goes out the window. Right? But it's not possible to then use the quantity of money as the inflationary pressure. It has to come down to something else. What is it? Right? You can increase it. It has to come from increasing money. Like, you can't do it without more money. But then if you print more money and it doesn't create inflation and you can't explain why is it that inflation does happen? Right? And so now let's break this down a little bit, because again, quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failed to produce. It was an expansion of the Fed's balance sheet from $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion, and people want to ignore it, saying, well, the Fed, creates inflation by printing money. And I'm like, well, they failed back then. Does anybody want to explain why their monetary policy came to an end and that it couldn't spark inflation, even with the massive quantity of money that they had printed back then? Nobody wants to explain it. All right, so let's understand why we have inflation, why it is that the prices really increase. It comes down to supply and demand imbalances. And let's see how Cantillon describes it, because remember, Cantillon wasn't using a central banking system. Right? This was hard money back in the day. I have already noted that the acceleration or the greater pace in the circulation of money in exchange is equivalent to a certain degree in the increase of actual money. Money velocity. Wow. Here it is, something we have description of hundreds of years ago creating inflation, and it's the circulation of money. Right? Hey, all right, we got all-nighter in the house. Great to see you, buddy. All right. And it's the circulation of money that he's talking about. All right. I have also noted that the increase or decrease of prices in a distant market, domestic or foreign, influences the local market prices. So if you have it cheaper way off in a foreign distance, like we may have this particular commodity here in this country, it sells for this particular price, but then way off in a foreign distance, it's way cheaper. Well, now these local producers of this particular commodity, they have to adjust their prices to the foreign competitors, right? They may make plenty, but if they are making it cheaper, well, then you're going to end up adjusting your prices here. See, this doesn't have anything to do with the quantity of money here. This has to do with competition of a foreign competitor. Really, right? See, this is not necessarily the quantity of money. It may be the quantity of money in a foreign country. Yeah. On the other hand, money flows through so many retail channels that it seems impossible not to lose sight of it. Seeing that having been amassed in seeing to having been amassed to make large sums, it is distributed in small amounts in exchange and then gradually accumulated again to make larger payments. For these operations, it is necessarily to constantly exchange between gold and silver and copper money according to the requirements of the exchange. It is also usually the case that the increase or decrease of hard money in the state is not perceived because it comes into a state from foreign countries by such imperceptible means and proportions that it is impossible to know exactly the quantity which enters or leaves the state. This is why it's so important. The accumulation of money. Most people, like, if you think about it, you can look out and see somebody driving a car and you think, man, that person must have earned a lot of money in order to be able to drive that car. But is that necessarily the case? Right? No, they were making a purchase off of borrowing the money. Now, if they were making those purchases and everybody was making purchases off the accumulation of money in the state, well, then that would probably be a pretty high standard of living that you have absolutely paid for, and is because you had an abundance of money. But if you don't have an abundance of money, you're borrowing the money to buy that. There's a huge difference inside of that purchase. Again, back in his day, you wouldn't have been able to make the purchase because the hard money simply wasn't there anymore. And it was hard to see why it is that the money left, why it is all of a sudden the purchases are slowing down, because literally the money left. It went to a foreign country. Right? And it's hard to see when that was taking place. However, all these operations happen before our eyes and everybody takes a direct part in them. I therefore venture to offer a few observations on the subject, even though I may not be able to give an exact precise account. In general, an increase of hard money in a state will cause a corresponding increase in consumption, and this will gradually produce increased prices. So important to understand. All right. See, this is why quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failed to produce the inflationary scenario that the Federal Reserve was looking for, is because when even in Cantillon's day, right, the increase of hard money in the state will corresponding increase the consumption. Increasing the consumption will gradually produce increased prices. So you increase the prices by increasing the consumption. Quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 printed up a bunch of money. That money got sat in the banking system on the big bank's balance sheet, and unless that money got lent into the system, it didn't chase the goods and services out there. All that money was just sitting there not doing anything, and there was no money velocity taking place. That's why it didn't create the inflationary scenario the Fed was looking for. The expectations of the people, hyperinflationary expectations of the people from all the money printing, did create an inflationary pressure, but it wasn't enough. And I mean, I know I believed in the hyperinflation scenario back in quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4. It made me dump all my money into silver to try and protect myself from an inflationary scenario that never occurred. Right? It's because they didn't chase the goods and services. All right. Okay. If the increase of hard money comes from gold and silver mines within the state, the owner of these mines, the entrepreneurs, the smelters, the refiners, and all the workers will increase their expenses in proportion to their profits. Their households will consume more meat, wine and beer than before. They will become accustomed to wearing better clothes, having finer linens, and having more ornate houses and desirable goods. Wow. So you get more income. What do? Oh, you go out there and you spend it on nicer houses, nicer cars, nicer food, nicer clothing, nicer experiences. Right? That's what everybody does with the new money. Everybody. You become industrious, you get the new money in. Once you get the new money in, you want to enjoy the new money. That's exactly what will happen every single time because we're human beings. Consequently, they will give employment to several artisans who did not have that much work before and who, for the same reasons, will increase their expenditures. Oh, wow, this new money starts pouring in. The first people who have access to it start spending it on these luxurious experiences, and the people who get that money start to spend it as well. Everybody's increasing their expenditures. All this increased expenditures on meat, wine, wool, etc., necessarily reduces the share of the other inhabitants in the states who do not participate at first in the wealth of the mines in question. Wow, separation between the rich and the poor. See, this is how it's happening. All of a sudden, there's, all these other people are like, oh man, I used to drink wine once a month, and now I drink it every single day. I increased my consumption that much. See, people wonder, it was just like, how come the 10% are doing most of the consumption nowadays? You think about it, 10% of the, like, hold on, let's set aside the essay aside for a second. 10% of the wealthy households, do 50% of the consuming. People say, how is this possible? And I think about it just from this sense right there, just from what Cantillon was describing hundreds of years ago, this is what's going on. There might have been a time when that household, just for example, may have, the adults of the household may have bought a bottle of wine once or twice a month, right? Typical household. But a wealthy household might be doing it every single day. Every single day with dinner, they have a bottle of wine. It might be a fancy bottle of wine. This is the added consumption, the luxurious experiences. Those people are separating themselves from everybody else, as the more purchasing and consuming of that wine is now depriving the bottom half of being able to consume that wine, because it's now going to the rich elitists, and because they're consuming it every single day. Right? They have to work ever increasingly harder and maybe get to consume it once a month. You see the difference? Okay. All this increased expenditures on meat, wine, wool, etc., necessarily reduces the share of the other inhabitants in the state who do not participate at first in the wealth of the mines in question. The bargaining process of the market with the demand for meat, wine, wool, etc., being stronger than usual, will not fail to increase their prices. These high prices will encourage farmers to employ more land to produce the following year, and these same farmers will profit from an increased price and will increase their expenditures on their families like the others. Those who will suffer from these high prices, now think about it, the price increases, those who are producing those goods, right, they increase the amount that they are producing in order to acquire the money. They get more money, they increase their expenditures, and now there's a group of people who are really suffering. You see how Cantillon's talking about this? You had this new money coming in, the people enjoyed that new money, they started spending it on a bunch of stuff, that stuff became unavailable to the people at the bottom line, right? And he goes on to talk about it. It was just like, okay, the stuff went up in price, now the people who are producing start getting more money in. Once they produce, because they're producing more of this expensive stuff. Then what happens, right? And the same farmers who profit from the increased prices and will increase their expenditures on their families like the others. Those who will suffer from these higher prices and increased consumption will be, first of all, the property owners. Whoa! The ones who suffer the most first are the property owners. Well, that's interesting. To think that the property owners were the ones who were making all the money. However, there's a situation that has taken place. What is it? Okay, those who will suffer from these higher prices and increased consumption, the first, right? The first of all are the property owners during their terms of leases. See, they signed a lease in which they said, hey, man, we're going to, charge you this much rent for the next year or whatever, and we're setting that contract up, here you go, right? Now, every single month, you're required to come up with this, but as the prices increase, their income is staying the same because they're contracted into it. So they're suffering the most. They can't increase their prices yet. So they suffer first. This is why people get so mad at them. During their terms and leases. Then their domestic servants and all their workmen or fixed wage earners who support their families on that salary. They all must diminish their expenditures in proportion to the new consumption, which will compel a large number of them to immigrate to seek living elsewhere. All right? You see again how it's just making it so much more difficult. The property owners who will dismiss many of them, basically get fired or laid off, and the rest will demand wage increases in order to live as before. See, they left or they want a lot of money because they can't live here anymore. See, I'm experiencing something very similar to this. This is him breaking down gentrification essentially. So I'm experiencing something very similar to this. Like all these people who work here, the working class individuals who used to work on a lot of houses, laborers, contractors, stuff like that. Well, it's become very difficult to find these guys because they simply can't live in this area anymore. It's too expensive. And the wages that they want for it are so high that people complain about it. Right? This is what we're experiencing now. It is in this manner that a considerable increase of money from the mine increases the consumption, and by diminishing the number of inhabitants, greater expenditures result by those who remain. So as those people are leaving, as is making it more difficult, as they are not making the purchases, the people who have start increasing their consumptions even more. You see how the problem exists here? This is why it's so important to understand it from this point of view, because he's talking about this from hundreds of years ago. This isn't a political thing. This is an economic force. To know that there are economic forces at play and to recognize how they are playing out then gives you a much better ability to position yourself and accordingly for it. That's why I keep going over this information and try to recognize these economic forces today and describe them in real time as much as I can. All right, let's continue on. If the money continues to be extracted from the mines, the abundance of money will increase all prices to such a point that not only will the property owners raise their rents considerably when the leases expire, right, just like we got today, and resume their old lifestyles, increasing their servants' wages proportionately, but the artisans and workmen will increase the prices of the articles they produce so high that there will be considerable gains by buying them from foreigners who will make them much cheaper. Uh-oh. See, all these artisans, all these people who were producing these luxurious things for these people to buy, well, they had to increase their prices of all these things that they built because they need to live just like everybody else does. And the people who have the money first looked at that and said, sorry, there's a foreign producer over there who's doing the same thing. I don't know if I really want to buy your stuff anymore. With my new money, I'm going to be buying the foreign production over here because it's cheaper. Because the standard of living's too high for you to produce and make it here for me. You see the problem that's going on? This is again underlying economic forces. Let's continue on. All right. Buying them from foreigners who make them cheaper. This will naturally encourage several people to import products at a lower price from foreign factories. All of a sudden, people recognize, like, oh, well, if they're buying foreign production, I'm a salesman. I'm going to be the middleman in that game. All right? Because I need to live. And so if I can buy foreign production cheaper and sell it to these rich people, and sorry, guys, everybody else who's already here, I'm just going to, like, work around you. I need to eat. So I'm going to do that. Right? That's what I'm going to do. Like, that's my position. I'm a salesman. All right. And this will gradually ruin the artisans and manufacturers of the state who will be unable to sustain themselves by working at such low rates because of the high cost of living. Yeah, it's unfortunate for you. I guess you should have been a salesman too, or rich elitist. I mean, one of the two. I mean, because, unless you're trying to buy stuff from foreign producers to sell it to the rich elitists, you can't compete and you're not going to have a standard of living anymore. In fact, you're going to have to figure out some other place to live, if nothing else, or just suffer the consequences of being on the bottom side of the wedge. See? I don't mean to be so blunt about this, but if you don't take it in this fashion, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat any of this stuff. This is hard. We are not in a good position here. If you're a working class individual, this is so important to you. Because if you can recognize and understand these economic forces, you can do something about it. But if you believe that it's somebody's fault, then you're going to be suffering. You're going to suffer. Right? Because this working class thing, it ain't going to do it anymore. It's too late. It's beyond repair. Right? But it's not meaning that you can't do something about it. But fixing it, putting it back, that ain't going to happen. Let's continue on. With an overabundance of money from the mines has diminished the number of inhabitants in the state accustomed to those accustomed, those who remain to excessive expenditures raise the price of farm products and wages for labor to high levels and ruin the manufacturers of the state by purchases of foreign products by the property owners and the mine workers. The money produced by the mines will necessarily go abroad. Now it's heading, it's not even, it's like the purchasing foreign production is literally sending the money straight out of the country and over to another place. All right? So now you're extracting money out of the mine or the central banking system, and now it's flying over to another nation through the purchases of foreign production. Continues on. Thank you everybody for joining in. We got 324 people watching. Keep hitting that like button, keep commenting. We'll keep this algorithm going and get more people to join in. This is probably some of the most important information for an average everyday person to understand. Don't think I have forgotten about the super chats. I will cover those things in just a minute here, guys. All right, this will gradually impoverish the state and make it, in a way, dependent on the foreigners to whom it is obligated to send money every year as it is extracted from the mines. Think about it, obligated to send the money every year to these foreigners. Right? Think about Triffin's dilemma. And those of you who understand Triffin's dilemma would get this. The great circulation of money, which was widespread in the beginning, ceases, poverty and misery follows, and the exploitation of the mines appears to be only advantageous to those employed in them and to the foreigners who profit thereby. If this continues, the only people who are going to benefit from the extraction of money from the mines are the people who are closest to it, the people who import the foreign production, and the foreign producers themselves. Everybody else suffers the consequence. This is the reason why the middle class has disappeared and why it is so difficult for the working class to make it nowadays. What I have just read over the last 30 minutes is probably the most important thing that you can internalize and understand right now. The new money coming into the system separates the rich from the poor. The more the new money comes in, the more it's going to make a situation that it's only advantageous to those employed by the central bank, closest to that money, closest to the lending, and the foreigners who profit thereby. People who are buying that production from the foreigners and selling it to the rich elitists. Everybody else is suffering. If the new money continues to pour in, which it will, this problem continues to get worse. And this is the reason why it's so difficult. This is why you're having such a hard time understanding why it is that the political arena cannot fix it. It's because there is no fixing this. This is a situation that is described hundreds of years ago, and the only reason why Cantillon can write it down hundreds of years ago is because he was recognizing it from hundreds of years before that, if not thousands. Let's read some of these super chats and we'll continue on. There's one. We got one from Angry Capitalist. Get yourself and your family over the wedge. Absolutely. Thank you, Angry Capitalist, for the support. I really appreciate everybody who is sending the super chats. We got Consumer Debt Chit Chat with the $2 super sticker that says cool. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you guys being up in here. And again, we got 335 people watching with 101 likes. Keep hitting that like button, guys. We'll get this video spread around for more people to join in. Again, if we understood this as a whole, if these economic forces were taught to us as a child, we would naturally be making the right decisions moving into the future. We would move our production we would move our efforts, our time, our ability into more production and savings. But instead we move into luxurious experiences. And this is the problem that we now face. Cantillon was describing it. He was just saying it. If you get the new money in, you want to enjoy that new money, and enjoying the new money is going to separate the people from the poor, or separate the rich from the poor. It's going to make the wedge worse, and it's going to only be advantageous to the foreign producers and the people who are in that process of selling it to the rich elitist. And this is the unfortunate situation we now face. I would love to come up with a fix for it. My only fix for it is for you to understand how it is that you can deal with this. That's my only fix. Because everything else is going to be so painful experience that nobody's going to vote for anybody to do it. Even Donald Trump himself is now telling screaming about how the Fed should be lowering interest rates. Well, lowering interest rates would make the same situation, the economic forces, worse. It would send it on a rocket ship. This is approximately what happened to Spain since the discovery of the Indies. As for the Portuguese, since the discovery of the gold mines in Brazil, they have nearly always used foreign articles of manufactured goods. They didn't make anything for themselves because they were getting all this gold from a mine out of Brazil. It seems that they worked the mines only for the account and the advantage of foreigners. Think about the central banking system within itself. If you extract so much gold and silver that you will no longer produce anything for yourself, who is at advantage? Who's at an advantage? Right? The gold and silver that these two states extract from the mines does not supply them with more precious metals in circulation than others. They go and produce the most gold and silver, and they had hardly any in their own circulation because it went to foreign production. Right? That's what ends up happening. They could have saved it. They could have said, "Nah, I don't want your foreign production. I'm sorry, I'm not going to enjoy those beautiful linens and silks and spices and whatever it is you got out there." Right? Instead, I'm just going to enjoy my peaceful, quaint, small nothingness with a big pile of silver here because I've been working the mines my entire life and not enjoying the new money. Right? Because if that didn't happen, right, if I didn't enjoy the new money, then I would still have it and wouldn't be going over to foreign production because I have this high standard of living that I'm trying to maintain. I have to extract from the mines and send it over to foreign production. This is exactly what's going on now today. Think about it from the central banking system. The people who are closest to it are the ones who are going to continue to enjoy it. Top 10% do 50% of the consuming. Wonder why? Right? Because nobody else can afford it anymore. We don't compete. It's not possible. Cantillon's describing it. All right. Now, if the increase of money in the state comes from a balance of trade, i.e., from sending abroad articles and manufactured goods of greater value and quantity than it is imported, and consequently receiving a surplus of money, this annual increase of money will enrich a great number of merchants and entrepreneurs in the state and will give employment to numerous artisans and workmen who provide the goods sent to the foreigners from whom the money is drawn. This will gradually increase the consumption of these industrious inhabitants and will raise the price of land and labor. This is an exact description of the United States during the Great Industrial Revolution when we started producing all the world's greatest stuff and sending it out there to the world, and the world was sending us their money. You want me to read it again? It's a perfect description of it. Yeah, let me do that. Now, if the increase of money in the state comes from a balance of foreign trade, i.e., from sending abroad articles of manufactured goods of greater value and quantity than it is imported, and consequently receiving the surplus of money. This is the United States. This annual increase of money will enrich a great number of the merchants and entrepreneurs in the state and will give employment. Lots of people work in these manufacturing jobs, right? And give employment to numerous artisans and workmen who provide the goods sent to the foreigners from whom the money is drawn. So you produce stuff, you send it over to the foreigner sends you your money. Good game, right? Everybody loves this one, right? The foreigners from whom the money is drawn. This will gradually increase the consumption of the people, right? Gradually increase the consumption of the industrious inhabitants and will raise the prices of land and labor. But the industrious people who are eager to acquire property will not at first increase their expenditures. See, now there's some industrious people out there who are thinking, okay, I'm not going to increase my expenditures. I'm going to drive a 97 Suburban and I'm going to do something else with my money. What is it? Right? Because there's a group of people out there who thought, I don't know if I really want to increase my expenditures. I mean, I see everybody else out there doing that because once you hit the money, you want to drive a nicer car, have a nicer house, have nicer clothes, have all these nicer things. But then there's some people back there who go like, wait a minute. I have another idea. What does Cantillon say that is? Okay. So you wonder why there's a separation between the rich and the poor. You want to blame it on politics, or do you want to blame it on a mindset? Here we go. Okay. This will gradually increase the consumption of these industrious who will raise the prices of land and labor. But the industrious people who are eager to acquire property, the people who are eager to acquire property will not at first increase their expenditures. No, they hold back. They drive a 99 Toyota Corolla and they save as much as they possibly can. So people say, what do you need to do? How do you do it? What is this information even useful for? Well, I don't know. I guess it helps make decisions on what it is you plan on doing. Because if you understand the underlying economic forces and you want to be a property owner, that means you have to back off on your expenditures. Because that's what property owners do before they're property owners. All right. They will wait until they have accumulated a large sum from which they can draw a secure interest income independent of their own occupation. Wow, these property owners become capitalists. They're now getting an income beyond that of their own occupation. They're trying to get money from someplace other than their efforts. They put their efforts, they save their efforts, their time, their energy, they deploy it into a capital investment, right? Something that is going to have a return on their capital, whatever it is. Nowadays, we have access to it all over the place. Back in Cantillon's day, I can't imagine what that would have been. Right? They will wait until they have accumulated large sums from which that they can draw a secure interest independent of their occupation. Once a large number of inhabitants have acquired considerable fortunes from this money, which enters the state regularly and annually, they will not fail to increase their consumption. Once they've done this, once they've got it there, once they got the money coming in, they will not fail to increase their consumptions. They will do it. Once they get the money, even if they had waited to get the property, to get to the position, once they've in position, it's time. It's time to increase the expenditures. Right? See, they might like at first, hey, we're good, productive, hard work, and saving, doing all that other stuff, but man, I got so much money now, I got to spend it. Right? That's exactly what he's going to describe right here in a second. Once a large number of inhabitants have acquired considerable fortunes from this money, which enters the state regularly and annually, they will not fail to increase their consumption and raise the prices of everything. Although these higher prices result in greater expenditures than they at first contemplated, they will, for the most part, continue so long as their capital lasts. If they get the new money pouring in, they're going to keep spending it. We wonder why the Hamptons is doing so well. Why it is that they're not dropping in prices, why they're selling more houses now than they ever did before, is because the rich elitists are closest to the money, and that's the properties they buy. It doesn't stop. The new money continues to pour in. It continues to separate the rich from the poor. This is an obvious sign of it taking place right here, right now, real time. Although these higher prices result in greater expenditures, they at first contemplated, they will, for the most part, continue so long as their capital lasts. For nothing is easier or more pleasant than to increase a family's expenditures. There's nothing better than to spend money on happy vacations and fancy cars and cool clothes and all the fun, wonderful experiences, man. There's nothing better than that. And nothing, absolutely nothing is more difficult or unpleasant than to decrease them. Once the new money turns up, people go into pain and misery and suffering, right? Because nothing feels better than to increase those expenditures. Nothing feels better than to increase your standard of living. It's the awesomeness. New cars, fancy vacations, big houses, pools. Excuse me. If an annual and continuous balance has caused a considerable increase of money in the state, it will not fail to increase consumption, raise the price of everything, and diminish the number of inhabitants unless additional products are drawn from abroad proportionate to the increased consumption. So unless you're just increasing a ton of foreign production, just shoving it in, right? Then what you're going to find is that the inhabitants can't live there. It's just too difficult for them. It gets even worse because they just can't afford it. So it has to come in from foreign production and a lot of it. I wonder I mean, how is it that Cantillon can describe it so long ago and be so accurate today? Maybe it's because of this underlying economic force. Uh, Moreover, in to match the increased consumption. Okay, moreover, in states that have acquired a considerable abundance of money, it is natural to import many goods from neighboring countries where money is rare and consequently everything is cheap. You think about how come China became the industrious powerhouse it is today? It's because they were producers of stuff so cheap. However, as money must be exchanged for these products, the balance of trade will become smaller. The cheapness of the land and labor in foreign countries where money is rare will naturally cause the building of factories and businesses similar to those of the state, which will not at first be perfect or as highly valued. That's exactly what was taking place, right? All of a sudden, we started finding foreign production being cheaper, and although China made cheap stuff, they were getting much better at it. And the better they got at it, the worse it got for us here in the United States, as we can no longer compete against them getting better and better. Right? The cheapness of land and labor in the foreign countries where money is rare will naturally cause the building of factories, right? And business similar to those of the state, similar to ours, but which will not at first be perfect or as highly valued. Very, very true. See, this is why I keep trying to hound this stuff to get off of politics. You can blame it on politics all you want. There is plenty to blame to go around, and it's easy to blame them, and it's fun to blame them, actually. It's fun to get on the power pendulums and blame them because you can come up with so many excuses and reasons for their stupidity, right? But then to understand it from an underlying economic force, then really just makes it just interference and noise. I mean, I guess if you want to watch it for the entertainment value of it, but there's nothing of real value there because they're not explaining it from the underlying economic forces that describe it so simply as Cantillon can from hundreds of years ago, describing things that he had seen from hundreds of years before that. So to think that they're not going to continue hundreds of years from now, I mean, I guess some people might believe that. I don't know. All right, let's move on. Okay. In this situation, the state can retain its abundance of money, consume all its own products, and a great deal of foreign products over and above all this, maintain a small balance of trade against the foreigners and at least keep the balance leveled for many years. In other words, the state will import in exchange for its commodities and manufactured goods as much money from these foreign countries as it sends to them for goods and products of the land it takes from them. This is the balance of trade. Import as much as you export. If the state is a maritime state, the easiness and the low cost of shipping for transport of these commodities and manufactured goods to foreign countries may compensate in some way for the high cost of labor caused by the overabundance of money. Right? So if you have a place that produces it more expensive than the foreigners, it may be that you have the ability to transport that higher cost goods easier, more efficiently than the cheaper foreign producers can, and therefore you can still compete. Think about it. Cantillon recognized these things. He says, yeah, even if you do produce it higher, if you have better transportation, you can still compete. Therefore, commodities and manufactured goods of this state, expensive though they may be, will continue to sell in foreign countries and sometimes will be cheaper than the manufactured goods of another state where the labor is paid less. This is how it happens. The cost of transport greatly increases the price of goods sent to distant countries. However, these costs are very moderate in maritime states where there is a regular shipping of all foreign ports, and ships are nearly always found there ready to sail, taking on board all cargoes entrusted to them and at a very reasonable freight. So all of a sudden there's an abundance of transportation. Even if you have cheaper transportation, it doesn't make you any more efficient, right? So again, like, if transportation is in high demand, well, then all of a sudden people want to take advantage of the high prices of transportation. They start building more ships or more ability to transfer cargo. And then you find that the price of shipping is the same no matter where you are. And now you're no longer competitive because you have a better shipping rate. Uh, this is not so in states where navigation does not flourish. There, it is necessary to build ships especially for transportation of goods, and this sometimes absorbs all the profit. And transportation there is always very expensive, which entirely discourages commerce. England today consumes not only most of its own small production, but also a large amount of foreign products such as silks, wines, fruits, linens, in great quantity, etc. Meanwhile, she sends abroad the products of her mines and manufactured goods, for the most part. No matter how expensive labor is due to the abundance of money, she does not fail to sell her products to distant countries because her maritime advantage at prices are reasonable and as those of France where the same products are cheaper. So simply because they are able to transport so much cheaper, they can still compete. Okay? And this was the example of it. The increased quantity of money in the state may also be caused, without a balance of trade, by subsidies paid by states by foreign powers, by the expenditures of several ambassadors or travelers wanting to stay there for political reasons, curiosities, or pleasures, or by the transfer of property and wealth of families who choose to leave their country to seek religious freedoms or for other reasons, and to settle down in the state. In all these cases, the sums entering the state always causes an increase in expenditures and consumption, and consequently increase the price of goods in the channels of exchange where the money enters. Now, again, that's a little more complicated, but essentially talking about foreigners bringing it in, right? Just literally like, somebody living in a foreign nation, moving to this nation and bringing the money with them, right? And then increasing, like, this is a good example of like gentrification of a particular area. Like Astoria used to be a hardcore working class, logging, fishing. That was the entire town. Like everybody who owned property here were logging and fishing. Now the property owners are retirees, hospital district, remote workers, people who make a lot of money, right? And so now it's just like the people who brought the money in from, not from the producing of fishing and logging that was typically here. Now it comes in from, wherever it comes from. That increased expenditures here in our area has caused the prices of everything to move up. So you can recognize it doesn't have to happen in a country. It can happen in a town. It can happen in a state, whatever. Your own household. All right. Okay, before the increase in the quantity of money, suppose that a quarter of the inhabitants of the state consume meat, wine, beer, etc. on a daily basis and frequently acquire clothes, linen, etc., but that after the increase, a third or half of the inhabitants consume these same things. But after the increase, a third or half of the inhabitants consume these same things. So it used to be just a third, and now a bunch of people are doing it because they got the money. Prices for these goods will increase, and a high price of meat will convince several of those who formed the original quarter to consume less meat than usual. A man who eats 3 pounds of meat daily will manage with 2 pounds, but he feels the reduction. Meanwhile, the other half of the inhabitants who hardly ate any meat at all will not feel the reduction. See, the people at the very bottom of the end, they didn't eat meat to begin with, so to reduce the amount of meat they consumed is not painful to them. They're already feeling the pain of not actually having it to begin with. Right? A man who eats 3 pounds of meat daily will manage on 2 pounds, but he feels the reduction. Meanwhile, the other half of the inhabitants who hardly ate any meat at all will not feel the reduction. The price of bread will increase gradually because of the increase in consumption, but as I have suggested, because of the increase in consumption, as I have often suggested, but will be proportionally less expensive than meat. The increase in the price of meat is noticeably felt because it causes a reduction in the consumption on part of a small portion of the people. But the increased price of bread is less noticeable because the decreased consumption is spread across the entire population. See the difference? Like you don't notice the decrease in consumption because everybody's doing it at the same time. But if you have a certain group of people who are consuming meat and a certain group of people who don't consume meat, the people who are consuming meat have to feel the reduction of the expensiveness of it, they feel it. But the people who weren't consuming, they didn't feel it. But if everybody's consuming bread and there's a slight reduction in the consumption of bread, not everybody really feels it because they're all feeling it equally. It goes on and explains this, right? But the increase in bread is less noticeable because the decrease in consumption is spread across the entire population. If 100,000 extra people move to a state with 10 million inhabitants, their extra consumption of bread will amount to only 1 pound in 100, which must be subtracted from the old inhabitants. But when a man consumes 99 pounds of bread for his substance instead of 100, he hardly feels the reduction. You see, like everybody across the board takes a small reduction in the amount of bread that's available. You don't really notice it when you go from 100 pounds to 99 pounds. When the consumption of meat increases, farmers increase the size of their pastures to produce more meat. In this diminishes cropland and consequently the amount of wheat produced. However, that generally causes meat to become proportionally more expensive than the bread is. That imports of Sorry, guys. Okay, however, that generally causes meat to become proportionally more expensive than the bread is that imports of foreign wheat are usually permitted while imports of beef are absolutely forbidden. So they put in price controls. Oh, wow, tariffs way back in the day. All right, to protect the farmers. As in the case in England, or heavy import duties are imposed as in other states. This is the reason why rents of meadows and pastures rise in England with the abundance of money 3 times more than the rents of cropland. It's because all of a sudden, if you're using that property to produce meat, right, and because of the tariffs and duties and everything else that's put on the foreign production, to prevent that meat from coming in, that particular land that produces meat becomes very valuable. Right? The rents on that is way higher than the rents of those who are just producing wheat, because everybody produces wheat, and there's so much abundance of wheat that it's not a very, very valuable crop, and therefore can't pay a high rent, and therefore that particular property is not very valuable. But if you use it to produce meat, very valuable rent. Location, location, location. Right? All right. There is no doubt that when ambassadors, travelers, and families move to a state, the increased consumption will cause higher prices in all the markets where they spend their money. You know, I also think about that when it comes to like foreigners buying real estate. Yeah. I mean, he describes it right there. Ambassadors, travelers, and families of a state, or when ambassadors, travelers, and families of the state increase consumption. As for the subsidies the state has received from foreign powers, they are either hoarded for the state necessities or are put into circulation. If we assume they are hoarded, they do not concern my argument, and I am considering only money in circulation. Hoarded money, silverware, churches' money, etc., are resources that the state turns to in emergency situations, but are of no present utility, right? Because they just sit there and not doing anything. Very much like quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 did. Sat on the big bank's balance sheet and didn't really enter circulation, right? That's what he's saying here. If you hoard onto this money, it doesn't really lend into any of this stuff. It's only when it gets spent into circulation. If the state puts these funds into circulation, it can only do so by spending them, and this will certainly increase consumption and raise the price of all goods. Whoever receives this money will set into motion the principles of business of life, which is the food, either for himself or someone else, since everything else is connected to this directly or indirectly. That was chapter 6 of the increase and decrease of money to the state, given by Cantillon hundreds of years ago. It's so good. I mean, that information is such a good thing to understand as far as why it is that that new money comes in and starts creating the higher prices. It is so easy to just say money printer go burr, prices go up. What else do you need to know? Well, it would be nice to know how that happens and why. And then why it is that it doesn't necessarily happen and why that happened, right? Like quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failing to produce an inflationary scenario for the Fed. It produced a hyperinflation expectation, but it didn't really actually produce an inflationary scenario that they were looking for. And I know a lot of people might argue with that, saying, dude, you need to look at the right thing. I'm not looking at the right thing. I'm looking at the things that the that the Federal Reserve is looking at. Because your right thing and their right thing are two different meanings and don't mean the right thing to me. So there is no right thing. There's nothing right to look at. Everything is about the meaning that you have given it to begin with. And so when I look at the Federal Reserve, their monetary policy, I look at the things that they are looking at. Even if I agree or disagree with it, it doesn't really matter because it's not up to me to make the decisions about monetary policy. It is up to me to figure out what it is that I'm going to do with my life, considering what's going on with the monetary policy that they are in control of. Not me. I'm not in control of it. I can't tell them to look at, these numbers or those numbers. That's not up to me to do. It's up to me to look at what it is that they are doing so that I can make appropriate decisions for myself. If they're right, wrong, or indifferent doesn't really matter. It's the meaning that I have given it and what it is that I need to do with that, right? So, do we want to continue on? We're an hour into this video. A lot of people don't like the long live streams, but when we're here breaking these things down, I cannot stop, man. It just flies by, the time does, and it just seems like we could just go all day. Uh, Deplorable. Over a long period of time, the rich do put the money into circulation. That's why you don't see the immediate increase in inflation after quantitative easing. Well, it's not the rich putting it in there. It's being lent into the system. Remember that, right? It's not just like, oh, well, here, let me just put that into circulation. It's not like that. It's money being lent into the system. That's how that new money gets into the system. And so when you think about money being borrowed by certain groups who put it into cash flowing assets, and then money being lent or borrowed by other groups who are buying luxurious experiences, think about the separation that happens when this takes place. Okay? I mean, quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 did produce an inflation, but it was in things that you borrow money to buy. Like it wasn't necessarily in the cost of living itself. It was going into things that are borrowed to, like cars and houses and bonds and stocks and different things that you borrow money to buy. And it's funny how you borrow money to buy borrowed money. Essentially, like, what do you buy? Bonds. But that's essentially what's going on. All right, it's great news. We are not, so we can focus on relationship with Jesus Christ. All right. Simon, I love you. I love you too, man. I love how you break down economics. Thanks. Do you ignore all the jargon that suit and tie um, economics use, like charts and graphs, or is that stuff important as well? Just curious. Tony, I mean, I think that's a really good question. Is it important? Absolutely, it's important to the person who has positioned themselves to use that information to guide their experiences, guide their decision makings, all that other stuff. So it's super important to them. But I didn't make that important to me. Like what I find important to me is the things that I have discovered through monetary policy, because the things that I am doing doesn't necessarily are affected by the decisions of a political decision, right? Like other people have positioned themselves that a political decision has a huge impact on their life. You can think about that being different, like, where you're standing on the shoreline. Like, are you going to get nailed by this next wave coming in, or are you standing so far up that it just kind of crests across your toes and you're not really in any kind of danger of anything? Right? Like, these are two different experiences on the exact same beach and the exact same weather, experiencing the exact same thing. Right? But they're not in the same position. And I think that's important to understand. It's like I try to use the analogy of being out on the river. I live right along the Columbia River, massive amounts of traffic that comes up and down the river, everything from huge freighters all the way down to little tiny, I mean, skiffs, if you think about it, like a 12-foot skiff wouldn't be out of the realms of being ripping around out there on the Columbia River. These two people who are operating these two vessels are not thinking the same thing. They're in the exact same condition, right? They're in the same body of water. They're in the same weather condition. They're in the same tides, the same everything. But they are not thinking the same things. They are not making the same decisions. They are not doing anything that's even similar to each other. But yet here they are in the exact same spots, right? That's the way economics works, and that's why it's very difficult for a lot of people to internalize the information, is because they're looking at it as like a whole, like we're all in this boat together. No, we're not. We're not all in this boat together. Some of us are in different boats. If we were all in this boat together, then some people wouldn't be killing it and some people would be suffering. That wouldn't be the case. We're all in the same environment together, but we are definitely not in the same boat, right? The decisions that you make are going to be very different. And that's why I keep bringing this stuff up and keep talking about it over and over again. What was the So yeah, no, I sometimes use charts, like if it's, some information that I'm looking for or whatever, I'll use a chart, but I don't base my economics theories or anything else off of those kind of things. All right. So hit the thumbs up if you want me to continue reading. We got chapter 7 to go. 332 people with 161 likes. If you get it up to 175 in the next 5 minutes, I'll continue into chapter 7 if you want me to continue on. So go hit that like button, get it up to 175 in the next 5 minutes, and we'll continue on. Otherwise, we'll just call it good at that. How are we supposed to survive government regulations? It's now not economically feasible to produce goods and services in the United States. Well, then don't try that. Try do something different, right? Try and understand that there is all kinds of ways to make money in this country, and that there is all kinds of places that you can deploy that money into capital investments for a return. Get that mindset. Don't try to fix it. There ain't no fixing it. We can't go backwards. Right? There's no going backwards. Backwards is an incredibly painful experience that nobody's going to vote for. You have to understand the position that you're in. Who cares that there's a bunch of government regulations? Yes, that exists. Now, you can't do it the way that you used to or the way that you want to. Now you have to change the way that you're going to do things, because it's not a matter of what you want or need, right? I mean, I wish and hope and dream and pray that things are different, but that's not going to do anything. Right? I mean, I think having good ideas is not a bad idea, right? Having good ideas is a good idea, but having the right mindset, considering that you're not going to be able to change anything on the outside. The only thing you can change is the way that you handle the information that you are receiving. It's the only thing you can do, right? All right, we're almost there. We got one more like to go. All right, Jake Northwest. Thank you very much, guys. We'll continue on with this, reading into chapter 7. Jake Northwest, $2. Thank you so much for the super chat and the support and everything that you have ever done for the channel, because you've been here a long time, man. Have a great idea for a video. Please read below. Okay. Jake says, can you get a whiteboard sometime and explain to me, like I am 7, the difference between these philosophies? Milkshake, Lynn Alden, Nothing Stops This Train, and the Macro-Largo Accord, or the Mar-a-Lago Accord. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could think about something like that and try to compile that into a video. All right. I mean, I understand, like, but okay. Well, one of them's a hypothetical, right? So that one is just like a big what if, like the Mar-a-Lago thing, right? That's a big what if. What was the other part? I just kind of want to understand this again. The milkshake theory. Okay, and then Lynn Alden's Nothing Stops This Train. I got to really review Lynn Alden's stuff a little bit more. Okay. But I'll certainly do that. Okay, I complain and blame because it's my nature. Well, deplorable. I guess the name is fitting. All right. Federal debt continues to outpace GDP, leading the Fed to stimulate buybacks. Okay, that's the Treasury doing buybacks. The Fed's not doing that. And swaps to boost GDP growth. Okay, and that was something that they had announced literally 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago that they were going to be in this position. So this shouldn't be surprising. Like anybody, like the Treasury buyback was something that they had planned a long, long time ago. And I did videos talking about it. In fact, I thought it was going to be a bigger deal than it is. Most people who are picking up on it now are trying to make it a big deal. And although it seems like a big deal if it's brand new information coming in, but considering that they made the announcement so long ago, like it was like literally the first Zuber conference that I had attended 2 years ago, I was talking about that. I was talking about the Treasury going into a bond buyback program and how it was the first time in a long, like what, since the 90s or something that they had purchased back their own bonds. And it's to bring market, it's okay. The reason why they're doing it is because they have two different types of bonds. They have on the run, off the run, right? On the run, forgive me if I get this wrong. On the run are brand new bonds that have just been made. Off the run are the ones that are already in existence. Okay. So off the run bonds are less of a premium than on the run bonds. So when you have a bond investor out there who wants the newest ones that come out, and I never really understood this at first, like why the brand new bond would have more of a premium than the ones that are already existing, because they're all essentially pay the same from the purchase. They have a yield to it. It's the maturity. If they mature quicker, then they don't get the payout, right? So they want a bond that's going to last longer than the maturity rate, than quickly maturing and then having to roll over into another bond. So there's a slight premium on the run bonds as opposed to off the run bonds. Off the run bonds, as they are less desired, the Treasury absorbs those, right? To make sure that the bond market stays active, essentially, or doesn't, stays, how do I say it, stays liquid, so that these less of a premium or less desired bonds don't start dragging the yields up or something like that, or start dragging the prices down. So they said that they were going to be absorbing those particular bonds. And now here they are doing it, and it seems like it's an extreme deal, like this big deal that is happening, but I think it's less of a consequence to the economy than people want to give it credit to. Because again, I think this is the idea behind the Treasury stepping up, is that it provides the bond market, the investors, the bond investors, like essentially a backstop. They're like, well, shit, if the Treasury is going to be buying these bonds, and I'm not concerned about it, like making sure it stays liquid. All right. Wasn't the milkshake theory from the movie There Will Be Blood? I don't know. All right. Deplorable. Lord Jesus, please return to throw out these new money changers. Amen. All right. I have, but have not. Just when I had all the answers, someone changed all the questions. All right, let's start breaking this thing down. I thank you, everybody, for hitting that like button. We're up to 189 likes. We're going to break down Chapter 7, more on the increase and decrease of money in the state. This is Cantillon's essay on economic theory that I am reading from. All right, I understand the video's backwards. There's a link down in the description. Go and check out the link. You can go and buy this essay off of Amazon by clicking on that link and buying the essay off of Amazon. I will get a little commission off of that. But you do not have to buy this essay off of Amazon. You can get it for free at the Mises Institute just by Googling Cantillon essay on economic theory. You should be able to find it right away. Go and click on the link. Take a look at the essay at the Amazon affiliate link that I leave down in there. By clicking on that Amazon affiliate link, anything you put in your cart for the next 24 hours, I will also get a commission on. So you don't have to buy the essay. Go buy whatever you want, right? Just click on that link first, and I will get a little commission off of everything that you purchase from that point on, or for the next 24 hours, and then actually purchase in the next 30 days. So it's a great way you can support the Uneducated Economist. Okay, let's break this down. More on the increase and decrease of the quantity of money in the state. Chapter 7. Abstract. When there is an increase in the quantity of money, prices will increase depending on how the new money holders decide to spend their money. The price changes will also be affected by such things as regulation on trade and the perishability of the products that are traded. In other words, the simple quantity theory of money is naive in proposing that a doubling of the quantity of money will double prices equally. Changes in the quantity of money will change relative prices and have real effects on the economy. a phenomenon known as the Cantillon effect. All right, so here we go. Where gold, silver, and copper are extracted from the mines, they have an intrinsic value proportional to the land and labor that enter into their production. States that have no mines states that have no mines have the added cost of importing the metal. The quantity of money, like that of other commodities, determines its value against all other goods in a bargaining process of the marketplace. And so basically, as the abundance of money and the circulation of it determines what value it has. All right, if England begins for the first time to make use of gold and silver copper in exchanges, money will be valued according to the quantity in circulation, proportionally to its power of exchange against all other merchandise and products. The bargaining process of the market will determine this estimation of value. On the basis of this estimation, the property owners and entrepreneurs will set their wages of their domestic servants and workmen at so much a day or year, so that they and their families may be able to live on the wages they receive. Right? Seems pretty logical. I mean, you got to pay them a living wage, right? Let us now assume that because of ambassadors and foreign travelers residing in England, as much money has been introduced into circulation as there was before, thereby doubling the quantity of money. This money will pass first in the hands of various artisans and servants, entrepreneurs, and others who had a share in providing transportation, amusement, and etc. for these foreigners. Manufacturers, farmers, and other entrepreneurs will feel the effect of the increased money, which will increase the expenditures of a great number of people. In this will in turn increase market prices. So you see that the new money coming in is an increase in expenditures, the consumption. That's the important part to understand. When new money comes in, it's got to go into consumption if you want to see it create the inflationary scenario. Just simply producing the money is not necessarily going to be an inflationary pressure. Even the children of these entrepreneurs and artisans will enter into new expenditures. With this abundance of money, their fathers will give them a little money for their petty pleasures, and they will buy cakes and meat pies, etc. Right? They just go and blast it on a good time. Right? The affluent kids. Very much like today. Right? This new quantity of money will be distributed so that many who lived without using money before will now have some. Many exchanges, which used to be made on credit by valuation, will now be made with cash, and that will increase the pace of circulation of money in England compared to before. I conclude from all this that by doubling the quantity of money in a state, the price of products and merchandise are not always doubled. The river, which runs and winds about the bed, will not flow with double the speed when the amount of water is doubled. The change in relative prices introduced by the increased quantity of money in the state will depend on how this money is directed at consumption and circulation. No matter who obtains the new money, it will naturally increase consumption. However, this consumption will be greater or less according to circumstances. It will be more or less directed to certain kinds of commodities and merchandise, according to the judgment of those who acquire the money. Market prices will increase more for certain goods than others, however the abundant money may be. In England, the price of meat might triple, but the price of wheat may increase less than 1/4. Now, this is, I think, another one to really understand and to internalize, is that when you get this new money printed, right, you bring in new money into circulation and you start spending that new money out there into the economy, certain things are going to have a major increase in price. Take cars, for example. Cars really dramatically increased in price, and everybody talked about it and noticed it, but I don't hear a whole lot of people complaining about the cost of toilet paper. The availability of toilet paper had become very difficult at one time, and people were paying a high price to get it because it wasn't there. But once it's available, Price fluctuation in toilet paper is almost non-existent. Like nobody really talks about that, right? But they will talk about how expensive a car is. Some things have such an increase in price or such, a limitation to the people out there that it becomes very noticeable and it's obvious, and that has a major increase. But something that is produced in such abundance and such availability to people out there, they're not going to notice the price increase as much. So increase the amount of money, put that money out there. People who have access to it, they want to buy a car, they take all the cars out there, but they're not necessarily increasing the amount of toilet paper they're going to go buy. Right? That's why, it's difficult to say money printer causes all prices to go up. No, not really. It causes consumption to go up, and then there's some consumption that's more than others. In England, it is still permitted to import wheat from foreign countries, but not cattle. For this reason, however great the increase of money may be in England, the price of wheat can only be raised above the price of the countries where money is scarce, right? So even though you have all this money, foreign competition out there is only going to let the wheat price go so high, right? And there's going to be an abundance of wheat, and then the price can only go that far. The price of wheat can only be raised above the price of other countries where money is scarce by the cost and risk of importing the wheat from that foreign country. So however much it costs to get there and how much they can produce will determine the price in that country, regardless of how, or in the country of, speaking of, right, the country with all the money, based on the availability of it. All right. Okay. Where am I at here? Okay, it is not the same with the price of cattle, which will necessarily be proportioned to the quantity of money offered for meat in relation to the quantity of money and the number of cattle raised there. Because there's a limited amount of cattle, there's only so much meat that's going to go around, and that demand for meat will be set by the availability of money within that state and the people who have access to it. Right? But if they were to bring meat in from foreign producers, the meat price would obviously drop to whatever it is that the foreign producers could do and the transportation they could get it there. An ox weighing 800 pounds sells in Poland or Hungary for 2 or 3 ounces of silver, but commonly sells in London marketplace for more than 40. Yet, the bushel of flour does not sell in London for even double the price of Poland and Hungary. So the price of flour in Poland and Hungary is essentially somewhat the same, but yet the price of an ox in Poland is far, far cheaper than it is in England because of the availability of it, the abundance of the commodity itself. An increase of money will only increase the price of commodities and the merchandise by the difference of the cost of transportation, the cost of transport when the transport is allowed. But in many cases, transportation would cost more than the good is worth. Therefore, example, timber is useless in many places. The cost of transportation is also the reason why milk, fresh butter, lettuce, and game are almost given away in the provinces distant from the capital, right? Because there's such an abundance of milk and butter and lettuce and game out there away from the capital that it has hardly any value. But if you can get it to the city, if you can get it to the capital, well, now you got something of value, right? But away from the capital, not so much, because there's an abundance of it away from the capital. I conclude that an increase of actual money in the state always causes an increase of consumption and a routine of greater expenditures. But the higher prices caused by this money does not affect all commodities and merchandise equally. Prices do not rise proportionally to the quantity of money. Bang, right? Let me read that again. Prices do not rise proportionally to the quantity of money unless what has been added continues in the same circulation channels as before. Everybody has to get the money. Everybody equally has to get an increase in the money, and they have to increase their expenditures equally. The same. Not just a small group of people increasing theirs on the things that they want, but everybody across the board equally. That's why it worked so well during the pandemic to do quantitative easing, because of the stimulus packages that went out to a broad amount of people. Not everybody got it, but a great number of people got it equally at the same time. Equally. I guess equally in time. I guess that's what it was. Okay. In that short window of opportunity. Okay. And continue on. We're almost done here. In other words, those who offered an ounce of silver in the in the market would be the same and only ones to offer 2 ounces when the amount of money in circulation is doubled. And that is hardly ever the case. I recognize that when a large surplus of money is introduced in a state, the new money gives a new direction to consumption and even a new speed to circulation. However, it is not possible to say exactly to what extent. That's why people just want to wash their hands of the whole idea, is because it's so difficult to recognize how this is happening and where it's happening, right? When new money comes in, people spending that new money, like I might want a new Camaro, you might want a new computer, right? There, or new home renovation or something. This money gets spent in so many different directions, it's hard to keep sight of it and where it is that it's actually going to. Good stuff, isn't it? All right. That concluded chapter 7. That didn't take too long. We're, an hour and 25 minutes into this video. How many people we got? 343 people watching with 212 likes. Continue hitting that like button. We want to get it up to 250 people right now. With 343 people watching, we can easily have it at 250. If you want me to break down the last chapter here, chapter 8, on the increase, or it's called Further Reflections on the Increase and Decrease of Money to the State. This is the last chapter that Cantillon describes how it is that this increase and decrease of money to the state affects the economy, creates the manufacturing base to rise, and eventually foreign competition that comes in. He describes it from hundreds of years ago, right? Now we can blame it on current affairs and politics and technologies and all kinds of stuff, but to understand and recognize the underlying economic forces, this is how we are able to make good decisions for ourselves on what it is that we need to do with our lives, because every single one of us is going to be doing something different. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, all scarce, hard to get. I don't think it's hard to get. I think it could be hard to get for some people if they are not disciplined or willing to do it. Like I was talking with a buddy of mine the other day. We're both recovering alcoholics. So we were talking about how much money we had spent on alcohol throughout the years at the bars, whatever it was that we were doing. And something that I had told him, I said, if we were more disciplined, we would have been able to be like, be the capital investments and property owners that would now separate ourselves from everybody else and live that life that we would truly want for ourselves. We were talking about how much money we had blasted and how we weren't very disciplined, or at least I was saying that. And he goes, no, man. He says, you were incredibly disciplined back then. He says, I was too. And I was just like, what do you mean? I says, like, I was deep into debt. I was horrible, like depression, all that other stuff. He says, you came up with the money every single day to drink. Think about how the motivation behind trying to acquire, the desperation that you were feeling in order to acquire the money that you needed to get drunk. If you had that same desire and motivation to put towards investments, you would totally have been. You had the passion. You had the motivation. You had the desire. You just had it focused on the wrong item. You had it on alcohol instead of investments. You could have come up and scrounged up the $20 every single day to get drunk. Had you come up and scrounged up the $20 every day to put in towards an investment, you would be sitting there super elite, happy as you could be, because you had done that every single day your entire life. I don't know about super elite, but you'd be super happy anyway. I don't know about happy. You'd be in a much better position in life than you are today. But, he was right. I was motivated. I was disciplined. I was just had the wrong goal in mind, and it was to get drunk as opposed to becoming a better person with assets and all that. God, what a disgusting thought. Okay. Oh, well, this is the truth of it all. 227 people. We got a few more. We got 23 more likes to hit, and we'll continue on into chapter 8. 250 likes will get us there. 332 people watching. We should be there by now. Let's read some of these comments while we wait. All right, please leave a like if you haven't done that yet. Alcohols and drug addicts are the most focused people that I know. I agree. I think that I was probably most focused back then too. Yeah. No, I think we need to all get our 6-inch hooks ready and meet at the 4th Street. Huh. Okay. Got buckets of pay dirt to go through. Nice. That would be a fun thing to do. Go look for some gold. All right, the 1% is the one in control. You think you would raise the tax on themselves? It doesn't matter. They're regardless of that, taxes are essentially paid by the working class anyway. Right? Taxes are paid by the working class. If that wasn't the case, then we wouldn't have separation happening. We have massive inequality that is only getting worse. It happens through new money issuance. If you were to take the new money issuance and deny the people from going into a luxurious experience with it, then you might find where this separation may not occur. But then if they didn't go into the luxurious experience, people who borrow the money to go into production wouldn't do it, because the people who are borrowing money for the luxurious experience are buying those people's production. So essentially, without the separation of the classes, then the system begins to collapse. That's why I'm saying it's so important to get on the other side of the wedge. You know, there's no way the economy is going to bring working class individual the opportunity that they are looking for. It's not going to happen. And I mean, you can use, I shouldn't deny the idea that you can have a working class job and make it. Like, it's not typically hard to make it. Like, you can pay your bills, but it's going to be very difficult to make it good, right? And that's the problem I think a lot of people face, is that they can make it, but they can't make it good. And they want it good. And a good is a mindset. It's really your mindset on it, right? Because good is not somebody else's responsibility. Are we there yet? All right, we got 16 more to go, 16 more likes, and we'll start reading into chapter 8. We got 330 people watching with 234 likes right now. We can easily get 16 more likes. The best pot and best mushrooms equals the best time. Nah, see, like, I don't agree. I think the best time is achieved by having an elevated energy within you that then gives you the feelings of that of which you would have been intoxicated, but you're absolutely sober. To me, that is the best feeling. And I'm starting to feel that more and more. And in fact, the times that I do consume cannabis or whatever I smoke, that drags me down, and it almost gives me a depressive feeling, because the energy that I'm trying to carry more, the thoughts that I have, because everything is based around your thoughts, I'm trying to stay in a positive, higher energy feelings and thought process throughout my days, everywhere I'm at, everything that I am doing. And the times that I think, oh man, I'm gonna, enhance this feeling by smoking, I diminish it. It actually it's like it goes away. And so to me, it's just like, why would I do that? Like, I don't even understand why I'm doing it if it's just like, if it deteriorates the higher energy feeling that I'm carrying. I don't need to artificially try and boost that. And when I do, if it makes it worse, then why even try? It's like, to me, it's just like, might as well just get rid of it altogether. Waste of time and money anyway. All right, we're almost there. 351 people watching with 242 likes. 8 more likes, and we'll get started on chapter 8. Love your channel. A while back, you explained that the economy is local and economic crashes don't affect everyone in the same way. People who follow your advice can do well enough regardless. Yes, I totally agree with that. Like, not like you might have a particular region that starts to collapse, but you positioned yourself in a way that takes advantage of that collapse. Like, maybe properties are going into foreclosure. And I mean, I don't mean to sound like be a vulture or something like that, but if you see opportunity, divorce, death, or destitution that's out there, and you take advantage of it, that's the economy. That's how the economy works. And to position yourself in that kind of fashion doesn't make you a vulture. It just makes you an opportunistic person. Makes you an entrepreneur. It's like, that's what you should do. Take advantage of the position that you are in the things that you are seeing out there. Don't deny yourself. All right, 3 more likes and we'll get started. All right. You're a lightweight partier, UE, amateur, rookie. Haha. No, dude, I used to be hardcore, so don't give me that, man. And I ain't planning on going back. Like, the best time in my entire life was the day that I gave it all up. I said, I ain't going to do this anymore. I'm not trying to tell other people what to do. But when somebody asks me, what was the biggest change in your life that got you onto the path that you feel is the appropriate one, where you're going to be able to provide for your family, not only in like financially provide for them, but then be able to provide for them with good experiences of time and energy and being there and being meaningful to the experience. That is something that I can never, ever ever say, man, I wish that didn't happen. Like, this is the best that I could ever possibly have ever thought that would ever occurred from giving up alcohol. Man, such a reward. All right, let's start breaking down this chapter 8. This is the final chapter of the three-part chapter series of Cantillon's essay on economic theory. This is part 2, chapter 8, further reflections on the increase and decrease of money to the state. You can find this essay at the Amazon affiliate link down in the description, Cantillon essay on economic theory. By clicking on that Amazon affiliate link, you will give the Uneducated Economist an opportunity to get a little commission off of the purchase of that particular essay, but you do not have to buy the essay off of Amazon. You can get it for free at the Mises Institute just by typing into Google Cantillon essay on economic theory. However, if you do click on that Amazon affiliate link, anything that you put in your cart for the next 24 hours, I will also get a commission on. So click on the Amazon affiliate link to see what the Cantillon essay, or how to spell Cantillon properly. And then go load up the cart with a bunch of stuff that you want to purchase in the next 30 days, and I will get a commission off of all those things too. It's a great way to support the Uneducated Economist. Okay, let's break this one down. This is the final chapter. This is a really good one. I mean, you guys are going to love this one, because this is talking about how the luxurious experience really deteriorates the economy. And here we go. Increase in the supply of money from the balance of trade eventually causes prices to rise. This in turn puts pressure on domestic producers and increases imports. The result is that a balance of trade is reduced and eventually is negative. This is Cantillon price specie flow mechanism, which demonstrates the reason for the tendency for equilibrium in the international monetary flows. The balance of trade can result in economic power, but this also causes the economy to lapse into luxury and decline. So people want to know why it is that we are going into decline, or why we will eventually go into decline. We understand now why it is that the separation between the rich and the poor occur. All right, Cantillon describes that very well within the previous chapters here that we broke down. But now we're going to understand how it causes the decline. Right? And a lot of people have already figured it out from the previous 2 chapters that we've already read. The next few chapters are going to be obvious, but it's going to really just clear it all up and fill in the blanks. Okay, this is a good one, guys. This is probably my favorite chapter in the entire book. All right, we have seen that the quantity of money circulating in a state may be increased by working its mines, by subsidies from foreign powers, by immigration of foreign families, by the residence and ambassadors of travelers, but above all, by the regular and annual balance of trade from supplying goods to foreigners and by receiving from them at least part of the price in gold and silver. So now, again, just right at the very beginning, the most important thing to take into consideration here is the way the new money comes in. If the money is coming in from working mines, right, foreign powers, immigration, families, all these residents, ambassadors bringing all this money in, but, right, it is above all by the regular and annual balance of trade from supplying goods to foreigners and receiving from them at least part of the price in gold and silver, by being a manufacturing state, producing goods and services and distributing that out there to the world and bringing the money in. That is by far the best way to bring new money in, above all. Right? It is by this last means that a state grows most substantially. Right? This is the way you get the biggest standard of living, the most substantial, especially when its trade is accompanied and supported by ample shipping and by a significant output of raw materials necessary for the production of exported manufactured goods. All right. So again, like when you think about it, if you are a miner and the economy has elevated, it's only advantageous for new money to come into the system for the miners and the people who have closest to the money, and then the foreigners and the foreign production, right? And those who are the entrepreneurs of buying that foreign production and selling it to them. But if you are a manufacturing state, everybody's working. Everybody's producing stuff. You're producing a blanket, and that dude over there is producing a hat, and this person over there is producing, flour or something, and all this production is being sent out there to the foreigners who are buying it. Everybody's getting a little piece of this money because they're all part of the production. Not just the miners and the people who are closer to the miners, not just the bankers and the people who are closest to them. This is everybody producing and getting a little piece of that trade. And that's why it's such a good way of raising the standard of living of the entire nation if everybody is a producer saver and producing and distributing out there to the rest of the world. Right? Best way to have an economy. All right. However, the continuation of this commerce gradually introduces a great abundance of money and little by little increases the consumption. Foreign production must be imported to meet this demand and must be paid for by reduction in an annual balance of trade. On the other hand, increased expenditures increase the cost of labor and the prices of manufactured goods. It often happens that some foreign countries try to set up the same kind of factories for themselves, in which case they stop buying those of the state in question. Although these newly established factories and manufacturers are not perfect at first, they reduce and even prevent the exporting of these goods from the neighboring states into their own country, where they can be acquired at a better price. So this is a little confusing, but what he is talking about there is that if you were a manufacturing state, like the United States is, and we were producing all this world's greatest stuff, sending it out there to the world was buying it, well, then all of a sudden, the world says, hey, I'm going to start producing that for myself, or somebody of the world, right, starts saying, hey, I'm going to start producing that stuff for myself. It won't be as good as what I'm producing because they're starting it for the first time. But what will end up happening is that they will stop buying it from me because they are producing it for themselves, even if it's not as good. Now I'm not getting the new money in. Big time problem. All right. In this manner, the state begins to lose some branch of its profitable trade, and many of its workmen and artisans will lose their jobs. Will leave the state to find employment in new foreign factories. It's just like, man, if you're not buying it, then if they're making it for themselves and they're not buying it from me, I may lose my job. And if I lose my job, then I'm going to have to go someplace where I can find another job where they are producing it from somebody who's going to buy it. Right? Because if we were producing more than we needed, well, now all of a sudden we're producing more than we need. I lose my job. All right? Now I need to go to a different factory. In spite of this diminution of the balance of trade, the custom of importing various products will continue. If the manufactured products of the state have a great reputation and can be shipped to the distant countries at a low cost, right? So as long as you have your shipping channels going and you're able to ship it cheaper, even if you're producing it higher, you will continue to distribute out there to the foreigners, right? You can domestically produce it and send it out there, even if you're producing it at a higher cost because your shipping is cheaper, right? So you're still competitive. If manufactured products of a state have a great reputation and can be shipped at a distant countries at a low cost, the state will maintain its advantage over the new foreign manufacturers for many years and will maintain a small balance of trade, or at least keep it even. If, however, some other maritime state tries to perfect the same articles and its navigation at the same time, it will, because of the cheapness in manufacture, take away several branches of trade from the state in question once they figure it out. I think that's the easiest way. We may not have, like, this foreign country over there may not be able, or it may be able to produce it at a cheaper cost, but because they can't transport it cheaper, they can't compete against the other higher cost producer because they can transport it cheaper. Once they figure out how to transport it, it's over. All right? It's only a matter of time. They'll figure it out. All right, because the cheapness, okay, several branches of trade in question. Consequently, the state will begin to lose its balance of trade and will be forced to send part of its money abroad every year in order to pay for its imports. So now, even if you had it, I was exporting and importing exactly the same amount. Well, the moment that they figure it out and they stop buying my production, now the balance of trade becomes equilibrium imbalance, right? And now I have to send foreign money over to the foreign producers in order to get some of the articles of clothing because they're no longer buying mine. Right? Like this causes the balance of trade to take place, the imbalance of trade. All right. Does that make sense? Did I say that right? I think I did. All right. Moreover, in the state in question could keep a balance of trade and its greater abundance of money, it is reasonable to suppose that this abundance will plunge many wealthy individuals into luxury. Okay. This is okay. Let me read this again because this is important. This is why it's one of my favorite chapters in this entire thing, is because of the move into luxurious experiences. This is the reason why we have the separation in the state, the reason why we have the problems, why the foreign producers are now competing with our domestic manufacturers. This is the reason why, right here. Moreover, even if the state in question could keep a balance of trade and its greater abundance of money, it is reasonable to suppose that this abundance will plunge many wealthy individuals into luxury. They will buy paintings, precious stones from abroad. They will want silks and rare objects. They set such an example of luxury in the state that in spite of the advantage of its ordinary trade, its money will flow abroad annually to pay for these luxuries. So they're like, oh man, we got everything in the world, but I ain't got that thing that foreign guy has over there. I want that stuff. I want those silks. I want those rarities. I want those odd things that the foreigners are producing out there because they're not produced here. Nobody else has them here, and they would be unique to me. So I'm going to buy these luxurious things from all these foreigners out there and send my money over to them. Think about Ferraris. To pay for these. This will gradually impoverish the state and cause it to pass from great power into great weakness. This is the issue. Right? Even if you had this wonderful abundance of money, the moment that you start enjoying that money, buying luxurious experiences, buying from the foreign producers, it will send this state from great power into great weakness. He goes on to describe how this occurs. Right? This is again, people are like, man, we need to do something about these top 10%, destroy the idea of them, eat the rich and all that. Yeah, we're going to fall into great weakness because that's part of the cycle. Okay? Here we are enjoying the absolute overabundance of opportunity and stuff that the foreigners are producing and shipping here in massive quantities. Okay? And there's people out there who say, hey, we need to make this end so we all fall into poverty and misery. I know it's difficult. I'm trying to fight my way up to the other side of the wedge. I know it ain't easy. Be a hell of a lot easier if it was 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago while we were experiencing the rise in the manufacturing state. But now we're trying to compete against foreign producers. And even if we were to produce it for ourselves, we still wouldn't be able to compete, and those manufacturers would end up buying from foreign producers, or the domestic manufacturers wouldn't be able to compete against the foreign producers. It's just the way it is. Let's continue on, guys, so we know what to do with our lives. Got to keep it light, right? Okay. When a state arrived at its highest point of wealth, and I always assume that a comparative wealth of the state consists mainly in their respective quantities of money, it is inevitable, right? It will inevitably fall back into poverty by the ordinary course of things. Once it has arrived at its highest point of wealth, it will inevitably fall back into poverty by the ordinary course of things. This is nobody's fault. It's just the ordinary course of things. Described hundreds of years ago from observations that he had seen from hundreds of years before that. Right? It's the ordinary course. The increase of money, increase the expenditures, increase the price of everything. The people who have moved into luxuries created the situation from the separation of the rich and from the rich and the poor, and it will inevitably fall back into poverty. by the ordinary course of things. The too great of abundance of money, which gives power to the state so long as it lasts, throws them back imprecipitably, but naturally into poverty. Right? Throws them naturally into poverty. This is the ordinary course of things when the new money turns off. Thus, it would seem that when a state expands by trade and the abundance of money raises the price of land and labor, the prince or legislators ought to withdraw money from circulation, keep it for emergencies, and try to slow down the circulation by every means, except compulsion and bad faith, to prevent its goods from becoming too expensive and avoid the drawbacks of luxury. This is what the state should do. Doesn't that sound like a boot on the face of humanity? In order to prevent this from happening? Let me read it again. Think about it in that fashion, right? Thus, it would seem that when a state expands trade and the abundance of money raises the prices of land and labor, the prince or legislator, right, the government, ought to withdraw money from circulation. Oh, no. Let's get that money out of there. Keep it for emergencies and try to slow down the circulation. Try to slow it down, prevent it from actually moving around, prevent the people from spending the money, from having the money, withdraw the money from circulation. A boot on the face of humanity. That's what they're describing. That's what Cantillon's describing. He just says it really nice. He sugarcoats it for you. Right? Slow down the circulation by every means, except compulsion and bad faith, to prevent the goods from becoming too expensive and avoid the drawbacks of luxury. Avoid the drawbacks of luxury. How does the government avoid the drawbacks of luxury? 90% of the people are complaining that they do not have a luxurious experience. 10% of the people are absolutely killing it out there. They're really enjoying the luxurious experience. New money coming into the system. However, it is not easy to perceive the opportune time for this, or to know when money has become more abundant than it ought to be for the good and preservation of the advantages of the state. Can't tell. Don't know. People are feeling it. Maybe right now it's us for us. This is, the opportune time. Right? Let me read it again. It's not easy to perceive the opportune time for this, or to know when money has become more abundant than it ought to be for the goods and preservation of the advantages of the state. Therefore, princes and heads of republics do not concern themselves with this sort of knowledge, and strive only to make use of the abundance of their state revenues to extend their powers and to insult other countries. I mean, is this not the same game over and over and over again, where they use the abundance of money to extend their powers and insult other countries on the most frivolous of pretexts? All things considered, working to perpetuate the glory of their reigns and administrations and to leaving monuments of their power and wealth is perhaps the best that they can do, because according to the natural course of humanity, the state must collapse on its own. It must collapse on it. You can blame it on politicians all you want. It's the people who are doing this. It's their luxurious experiences. It's the increase in the money and wealth. Right? The state must collapse on its own. They only accelerate this fall by a little. The politicians they're the symptom. They're not the cause. They're not the reason. They're not the problem. They are the symptom of this. They are the symptom. Right? Nevertheless, it seems that they should try to make the power last during their time of their own administration. They don't. They don't. They just try to push their glory, push their monuments, push their belief systems. But it's really due to the fact that we had to become an industrious people, moved into a luxurious experience, and give them the power that they needed in order to insult other countries. Like, that's what's going on here. Like, again, this isn't like something that he was predicting. This is something that he was describing as an underlying economic force. He's saying this is going to happen. It happened before. It's going to happen again. And it's going to look different every time because things change. But the underlying economic force described it perfectly. Like, this is what we experience from it. All right, continuing on. Few years. Few years are needed to raise the abundance to the highest point in the state. However, fewer are needed to bring it into poverty for the lack of commerce and manufacturing. Right? When the new money turns off, it's almost instantaneously goes into poverty, depression, misery, pain. Few years are needed to raise the abundance to the highest point in the state. Fewer are needed to bring it into poverty for the lack of commerce and manufacturing. Without speaking of the rise and fall of the Venice Republic, Hanseatic cities, Flanders and Brabant. Sorry, I butcher some of these names. The Dutch Republic, who have succeeded each other in profitable branches of trade, one may say France's power has only been on the rise from the 1646 when factories were established to produce clothing which had previously been imported, to the 1684 when the number of Protestant entrepreneurs and artisans were driven out of France. The kingdom has done nothing but recede since this last date. I know no better measure than the leases and rents of property owners to judge the abundance and scarcity of money in circulation. No better measure than the lease and rents of property owners to judge the abundance and scarcity of money in circulation. Think about how high the rent is too damn high. How many times have we heard that? It's because the abundance of money in the state is now overwhelming. Right? It's separated the rich from the poor in a dramatic fashion. Nobody can afford the rents anymore because of the abundance of money that's in the state. Right? I mean, we can blame it on all kinds of things. There's people going to be like, "Oh, dude, you're so wrong about that. This is the reason why rents are so expensive because of greedy people." I'm like, "Well, I get it, right? But that's part of the problem here that we are now facing, is that it's an underlying economic force that is a consequence of being a human. It's not, I mean, you want to blame humans for being human? I mean, I guess, right? We can understand that there's an instinctual behavior. There's a certain greed aspect to it. There's a certain thought process that people have to try and secure their future that creates the underlying economic forces. Once we understand them, we can position ourselves accordingly for it. To understand how it is that manufacturing can't possibly return to the United States in a way that we had once experienced, where we were distributing things out there to the world and the world was sending us their money. That doesn't occur. That's not going to occur. You can't do it that way. That's like going directly against the underlying economic forces. Okay? Well, I mean, I guess you could do it with a lot of pain and misery and boots on the face of humanity. Okay? Prevent the people from enjoying their new money. All right. I know no better measure than, describe the scarcity of money in the state. When a land is leased at high rates, it's a sign that there is plenty of money in the state. When land has to be leased at much lower rates, it shows, other things being equal, that money is scarce. I have read in the state of France that acres of vineyard near Mantes, not far from the French capital, which leased for 200 livres. They have, I don't know, I'm sorry, guys. I should learn how to pronounce things before I come out here, but I'm the uneducated economist, and you guys get it. All right, for 200 Torinos, a full weight in 1660, only leased for 100 of the lighter money in 1700s. However, the silver brought from the West Indies in the intervals should naturally have raised the price of land in Europe. Right? But the rents were so expensive. Let's see here. And the author of The State of France attributes this fall in rent to defective consumption. In fact, it seems that he observed a reduction in wine consumption. However, I think he was mistaken. The effect of the cause. The cause was a great rarity of money in France, and the effect of this was naturally a decrease in consumption. In this essay, I have always suggested, on the contrary, that an abundance of money naturally increases consumption and contributes above all else to a high valuation of the land. Right? Increased money, increased consumption. The abundant money raises products to honest prices. The inhabitants eagerly work to acquire them, although they do not show the same eagerness to acquire food and merchandise beyond what it is needed for their maintenance. See, I think right there, like he recognized it back in the day. Right there, the abundance of money raises products to honest prices. Like it raises the honest prices being that of what a foreigner can produce at the same price. Like you can't get it any higher because the foreign producer is going to bring it in. That's the honest price. It's as high as it's going to go, even if you bring new money in, right? It's like toilet paper is at honest high prices. That's as high as it's going to go, right? Unless you diminish the availability of toilet paper, the abundance of money coming in isn't necessarily going to drive toilet prices higher. But let me read that again. When the abundance of money raises products to honest prices, the inhabitants eagerly work to acquire them. All right, everybody goes to work, trying to pay their bills, trying to make their trying to make their monthly payments, right? They go to eagerly work to acquire them, although they do not show the same eagerness to acquire food and merchandise beyond that what is needed for their maintenance. See, most people just go do their day job and wondering why it's not enough. It's because they don't show the same eagerness to go beyond that. That's been a problem since the beginning of time. Showing the same eagerness beyond that of what it is to provide for your maintenance. How many people say my day job isn't enough? How many people say I shouldn't have to work 2 jobs in my life? Well, Cantillon was describing it from back in the day. He also talked about the people who postponed purchases so that they could become a property owner and deploy that money into an income beyond that of their efforts. But most people, what does he say? When the abundance of money raises products, the inhabitants eagerly work to acquire them, although they do not show the same eagerness to acquire food and merchandise beyond what it is need for their maintenance. That's all the work they do. In the first place, given that the price of land and labor are circulated in terms of money, the state where money is most abundant will give up less land and labor than it receives in other areas of trade. Thus, the state in question sometimes receives the product of 2 acres of land in exchange for that of 1, the work of 2 men for that of only 1. It is because of this abundance of money in circulation in London that the work of 1 English embroiderer cost more than that of 10 Chinese embroiderers, though the Chinese embroiderer much better and turn out more work in a day. Right? Because this guy essentially, think about it from the lazy American point of view. I get paid more to produce less than what the Chinese are getting paid to produce more. Same thing. Same thing. If you live in an abundant state that has all kinds of opportunities and wealth and food and everything that's going on, why would you have to work that hard beyond that of your own maintenance? You don't have to work that hard. But somebody else over there who has to work way hard because they have nothing abundant in their life and they have to do this in order to survive, they can produce way more at a far less than that of the rich, fat American can do. That's describing it essentially right there. And I don't mean, again, to be insulting. I'm just not coating it for you. Uh-huh. It's just straight up the way it is. And it's the way that Cantillon was describing it. Let me read it again. It is because of this abundance of money in circulation in London that the work of 1 English embroiderer costs more than that of 10 Chinese embroiderers, though the Chinese embroiderer much better and churn out much more work in a day. In Europe, people are amazed that these people can live by working so cheap and that the wonderful fabrics that they send us cost so little. How do they do this? How do they produce such wonderful items and they sell it so cheap? Right? It's because they're the poorest. They don't earn that much, right? They're working damn hard for very little. Instead of people here who work kinda for a whole lot. Secondly, tax revenues are more easily raised in states where money is plentiful and in relatively large amounts. This gives the state, in case of war or dispute, the means to gain all sorts of advantages over its adversaries from whom money is scarce. Gives them that ability, gives them the position to tax the rich and tax everybody, essentially, not just the rich, but tax everybody and then use it to go to war. If there are two princes at war over the sovereignty or conquest of a state, where one has much money and other has little money, but many estates worth twice the money of his enemy, the first will be better able to attract generals and officers with gifts of money than the second will be, giving twice the value of lands to the estates. Like he may have, one of them may have like an abundance of land and money or in value because of the property that he owns, but the other one just has a whole bunch of money itself. The one with a whole bunch of money can then buy generals, buy the armies, where the other one can't necessarily buy it because he has all this land. It's like, I guess you could give the land to the generals, right? Grants of land are subject to challenge and revocation and cannot be relied upon like money. Oh, the generals may not want it. Like it may be a good idea, but they may not want it. With money, munitions of war and food can be bought. I mean, I don't have to trade. I can like trade my land. I can trade money for everything I need, right? All the munitions, all the war, all the for the war and the food, and even buy this from the enemies. I can even buy this from my own enemy. Like the guy I'm fighting, I can buy food and stuff from him if I have money because he needs money. So the person with money can fight the war. Person with land, even though it might be twice as valuable as the amount of money that the other person has, having the money itself gives them the ability to fight the war. Okay. Money can be given for secret services without witness, but land, produce and goods will not serve for these same purposes. Not even jewelry or diamonds, because they are easily recognized. After all, it seems to me that the competitive power and wealth of a state consist, other things being equal, in the greater or less abundance of money in circulation in them. Right? So if you have an abundant state with a lot of money flowing around within it, you can use that money to fight wars. Where somebody else who has a lot of land value, right, but doesn't have a lot of money in circulation, they can't do the same thing, even if they have twice the value of the land, as opposed to the money sitting in the other state. And once the money is gone, then it's gone, right? You know, if you can't win the war, but if you win the war, then you get to take all that property too. All right. This one's a little longer, guys. Let me see. It's a couple pages. We're about halfway through this chapter. 2 hours into this. Okay. Probably got about another half an hour of this. I still have to mention two other methods of increasing the amount of money in circulation in a state. First is when entrepreneurs and private individuals borrow money from foreign correspondents at interest, when foreigners send their money into the state by shares of government stock. This often amounts to a very considerable sum on which the state must annually pay interest to foreigners. This method for increasing the money in the states do not make it more abundant and diminish the this method for increasing money in the state do not make it more abundant and diminish the rate of interest. With this money, the entrepreneurs in the state find it possible to borrow more cheaply, to provide work, and to establish factories with the anticipation of profit. The artisans and all those whose hands this money passes through consume more than they would have done if they had not been employed by the means of this money. This consequently increases price just as if the money belonged to the state through the increased consumption or expenditures this cause. Public revenues derived from taxes and consumption are increased. Money lent to the state in this manner brings in many advantages with it, but in the end, it always burdensome and harmful. The state must pay the interest to foreigners every year, and aside from the losses, the state is at the mercy of foreigners who can always cause trouble if they decide to withdraw their capital. This is the position the United States is in today, or going into, right? Because it's the borrowing of money from foreigners that now has increased the circulation of money, increased the consumption, increased the expenditures, the prices. Now we have to pay an interest to these foreigners, and if they decide to withdraw their capital, the new money is churning off. This is the precarious situation the United States faces today. Think about it. Cantillon described hundreds of years ago. All right. Surely they will want to withdraw their capital when the state needs it the most, as when preparing for war or defeat is feared. Right? Like, how many times have you heard right now that, the foreign investment into the United States government bond market is diminishing? Right? This is essentially what he's talking about when they withdraw their capital. The interest paid to the foreigner is always much more considerable than the increase in public revenue caused by this money. So even though we had borrowed this money, increased the public revenue, right? It's the interest paid on it is always much more considerable than the increase in public revenue caused by the new money. One can observe these loans passing from one country to another according to investors' confidence in the state to which they are sent. But in reality, states have paid heavy interest on these loans for many years, will often find themselves bankrupt and unable to repay the capital. When trust is shaken, shares of public stock fall. Foreign shareholders do not like to sustain losses, preferring to content themselves with collecting interest while waiting for confidence to return. But sometimes it does not return. In declining states, the principal objective of public administrators usually is to restore confidence in order to attract foreign loans. If the ministry does not attract in bad faith, and keeps its obligations, the money of the subjects will circulate without interruption. In this case, money from abroad has the power of increasing the quantity of money in the state. Right? But again, it's the problem, because even though you can increase the money of the state by borrowing that money, it comes to an end when you have to pay the money back, right? You can always try to increase the amount of money you're borrowing, borrow more money to pay back the old money and borrow new money and just keep going on and on and on. But it eventually comes to the end of the road where they're just not going to lend you the money anymore. All right? But the borrowing road, which has an advantage in the present, leads to a dead end and is but a flash in the pan. To restore a poor state to a shortage of money, a constant and real balance of trade is needed on an annual basis. It means you need to produce, save, and get that production out there to the rest of the world. As in the development through navigation, articles and manufacturers produced cheaper and thereby suitable for exportation. Merchants are the first to make their fortunes, then lawyers may get part of it. The prince and tax collectors get a share at the expense of all others and distribute their graces as they please. When the money becomes too plentiful in the state, luxury will follow and the state will fall into poverty. Every time. See, if you want to restore it, you have to be able to produce cheaper than anybody else. When you do, you will increase when you produce it cheaper than anybody else, you will send that stuff out there to the world. The world will send you your money, or their money. You'll increase your expenditures, and you will fall back into luxury. It's cyclical, every single time, no matter what. He describes it over and over again, right? Luxury will follow, and the state will fall into poverty. This is roughly the cycle that may be experienced by a large state which has both capital and industrious inhabitants. A talented public administrator is always able to begin the cycle over again. Not many years are needed to see it tried and succeed, at least in the beginning, which makes for most interesting situation. The increased quantity of money in circulation will be brought about several factors that my argument does not allow me to examine now. For the states without much capital, and where capital can only be increased by accident or by particular circumstances of the times, it is difficult to find the means that would allow them to flourish by trade. No administrator can restore the republics of Venice and Holland to the brilliant situation from which that they have fallen. But Italy, Spain, France, and England however poor they may be, are still capable of attaining a high degree of power by trade alone if led by a good administration and if they operate separately. If all these states were equally well administered, they would be great only in proportion to their respective capital and to the greater or lesser industriousness of their people. Right? That's why I like, the administration is only like what does it say? If all these states were equally well administered, they would be great only to the proportion of their respective capital and to the greater or lesser industriousness of their people. It's the industriousness of the people themselves. The last method I can think of to increase the quantity of money actually circulating in the state is by violence and arms. In this method, it is often blended with others, since in all peace treaties, one will try to maintain trading rights and other privileges one could obtain. So basically, just taking it from them through war effort. When a state mandates contributions or makes several other states tributary to it, this is a very sure method of obtaining their money. I will not examine the methods of putting this theory into practice, but I will say that all nations who have flourished in this manner have not failed to decline. Any nation that does this will fall into decline. Like states that have flourished through commerce, the ancient Romans were more powerful in this manner than all the other peoples we know of. Nevertheless, these same Romans, before losing an inch of their land or inch of their vast estates, fell into decadence through luxury and impoverished themselves by the reduction of money which circulated among them. It was this luxury that caused their empire to pass into hands of the eastern nations of the Orient. I think this is important. Like he talks about the fall of Rome, right? The Romans fell into decadence and through luxury and impoverished themselves by the reduction of money which circulated among them. It was this luxury that caused the empire to pass into the hands of the eastern nations of the Orient. They basically wanted all this wonderful production coming from the foreigners, and they sent all their money to them through the luxurious experience. So long as Rome's luxury, which did not begin until after the defeat of Antiochus, king of Asia, around the AUC 564. Anyway, okay, let me read that again. So long as the Romans' luxury came from product of the land and labor of the vast estates of their dominion, the circulation of money only increased instead of decreased. The public was in possession of all the gold, silver, and copper mines in the empire. They had gold mines of Asia, Macedonia, Aquileia, and the rich mines, both gold and silver, of Spain and other countries. They had several mints where their gold, silver, and copper coins were struck. In Rome, the consumption of all goods and merchandise drawn from their vast provinces did not diminish the circulation of money, and more than the pictures, statues, and jewels themselves. Although the wealthy landlords spent excessive amounts on their feasts and paid 15,000 ounces of silver for a single fish, all that did not diminish the quantity of money circulating in Rome, given that the provinces had tributes regularly, not to mention the money brought in by the lenders, by the governors, and their extortions. Everything, like at that time, everything had money flowing into the state. The rich people had lent money out to people who had interest coming to them. They had this vast production that was taking place, and all this money was flowing in, and none of it was really moving out. All right. And with this abundance of money in there, the people who had excess amounts of it were spending it like insanely. 15,000 ounces on a single fish. Well, if you got, 150,000 ounces, whatever, and it's just like it's not a big deal to you to spend that money because it's so abundant, then you find things like this. Like, think about Beanie Babies. Think about Tulip Mania. Right? When the abundance of money is so prevalent, it just starts getting spent in silly ways, in like obnoxious ways. The amounts annually extracted from the mines increased circulation in Rome during Augustus' whole reign. However, luxury was already on a very great scale, and there was much eagerness not only for curiosities produced in the empire, but also for jewels from India, pepper and spices, and all the rarities of Arabia. Silks which were not made in the empire began to be demanded there. Nevertheless, the money drawn from the mines still exceeded the sum sent out of all the empire to buy all these things. They were bringing in more new money into the empire through the extortions of these mines than can be spent. Even buying all this foreign production, right, was bringing in massive foreign production, but still the amount coming from the mines exceeded that. However, under Tiberius, money became scarce when that emperor collected 2.7 billion sesterces in his treasury. To restore an abundant circulation, he only needed to borrow 300 million on a mortgage of his estate. After his death, Caligula spent all of Tiberius' treasures in less than 1 year, and it was then that the abundance of money in circulation was at its highest in Rome. The wind of luxury kept blowing. The historian Pliny estimated that in his time the empire exported at least 100 million sesterces annually. Thus was more than was drawn from the mines. All of a sudden, this massive amount of luxury that Caligula went into, right? He started spending this money. All this money started going into circulation. All the circulation started raising the consumption, and people were moving into luxury, the luxurious experience of it, right? The wind of luxury kept blowing. The historian Pliny estimated that at this time the emperor exported at least 100 million sesterces annually. Now you're importing more stuff than you're exporting, and the mine production isn't exceeding the amount of imports. You are now exporting your money. The mines was not enough to keep up with the amount of imports that were coming in. So now the money is starting to diminish as you're exporting all that to foreign production. This was more than was drawn from the mines. Under Trajan, the land prices fell by 1/3 or more. According to the younger Pliny, the money continued to decrease until the time of the Emperor of Septimus Servus. Money was then so scarce in Rome that the emperor collected enormous quantities of wheat, being unable to collect enough tax money for his enterprise. Thus, the Roman Empire declined through the loss of its money before losing any of its estates. That's what luxury brought about, and what it always brings about in similar circumstances. End of chapter. All right. So good to understand that the rise and fall of Rome was due to the increase of money in the state and how it is that the people reacted with that new money. They were going out there conquering the world, taking the silver mines, the gold mines of all these nations and all these countries, and that money was inside of Rome, creating the luxurious experience that eventually caused the decline. All right. Once you understand it, once you understand that every nation, every corporation, every single household and individual person can suffer through these same economic forces. You either suffer from them because you don't recognize them and what is happening, or you take advantage of the situation that is at hand, knowing that it's happening, knowing that you can position yourself accordingly for it, knowing that a 99.7 or a 97 Suburban, 1997 Suburban is going to give you the ability to then use that money that you would have spent on a new luxurious experience of having a Camaro. You can use that to position yourself into dividend paying stocks, rental properties, doing something that has a return on that capital investment, because the move into luxury is what's eventually going to cause the decline. Once you see it, once you recognize it, now you can take advantage of the situation. These underlying economic forces have been playing out for years, hundreds, centuries, hundreds of years, thousands of years. It's a human consequence. That's what it is. And if you think that there's a way that you can prevent humans from being human, you can't. You can't change this. You can't change the psychology of somebody working really hard to acquire what it is that they want in their life and then tell them, don't want it. Work hard like that to acquire things that you want in life and then don't want them. Don't get them. All right? Like, is that feasible? Is that possible? Absolutely not. It's not going to happen that way. No point in thinking that it can. Knowing that there is an abundance of money that's in this system right now, that no matter how hard you work for it, if you are trading time for dollars, you will never be able to trade enough time to acquire the things that you want because the wedge is growing so big. Right? This is the situation we now face. You must deploy into capital investments to become the property owner. These are the two positions that you need to take. You cannot take a position that says, we're going to do it for the worker. Right? Hey, great idea. Love it, man. I work a day job. I do an hourly wage. I would love for that hourly wage to be enough to produce for my entire family so that my wife can stay home and my kids can go to college and I can go on vacation and I can have a retirement and I can live the American dream. It doesn't exist here in the United States. I'm not going to try for it. I'm not going to pretend that it can exist. I'm not going to pretend that I can vote for somebody who can make that exist for me. Because it doesn't exist, and I understand that the underlying economic forces means that I have to do something far different with my life today than has ever occurred in the past. All right? And this is how it's done, is by understanding why we are in the position we're in. Get your consumer debt to zero, interest, individual austerity, 100. Yep, absolutely. Okay, you aren't that far from me. I'm in Ohio. Western Pennsylvania. I thought a trailer instead of a Suburban, but same thoughts that I didn't need an engine, just something to haul loads. And see, like, for me, I'm not doing landscaping. I don't do construction like I used to, so I don't really need like that kind of vehicle. But it is nice to have the Suburban. There's no seats in the back, so it's just literally this bench seat and then it's all empty in the back of it. Oregon, it rains 9 months out of the year. To have a huge amount of dry space on a vehicle is oh gosh, it's a huge commodity around here, right? Because it rains so much, everything gets soaking wet and rots. So to be able to keep your tools dry, keep material dry, that's a huge advantage here. I complain about it sometimes, but it's my own fault, and at the end of the day, I make a living, so it's okay. You have a pickup with a roof. Oh, canopy maybe. A pickup with a roof. Yeah, that's what it is. Oh, that's what I have, yeah. Alrighty. Okay, guys, we're almost 2.5 hours into this. I really got to call it for the day. This has been a lot of fun being out here all morning, breaking down Cantillon's essay on economic theory, especially these 3 chapters. I think they're probably some of the most important chapters you could ever possibly internalize when it comes to any economic theory at all. Cantillon breaks it down, talks about the manufacturing state, talks about how it is that it increases and decreases. Understanding these economic forces is going to give you such an advantage. So much more of an advantage over most people who position themselves based on a political movement. And that's where I think the scariest part is because really they're basing it off of a power pendulum that is created by somebody else. It's not you. It's somebody else whose thoughts that you are following and getting in line with. And that's difficult because once that power pendulum disintegrates, all your passion, all your energy, everything that you put into it goes with it. And that's the sad, because politicians and those particular thoughts that are generated within like the mainstream media and the narratives and stuff like that, they're harvesting your passion. They're harvesting your energy. You could be using that to take advantage of your situation, but instead you're jumping on a power with them, feeding it to them. They're taking advantage of it. They're using it for their own gain. And at the end of the day, you get nothing for it. Harsh feelings, loss of friendships, frustrations and depressions and stress. That's what you get for it. Right? So I don't join in on that stuff. I try to understand this stuff from my own point of view. I look at the politics as a condition in which that we are now in. It's a symptom of the situation, and I need to take advantage of the situation as best I can, because there's some people out there who are absolutely killing it and other people who are suffering the consequences. There are some who have, and there's a bunch who have not. Understanding why that is occurring gives you the ability to position yourself much more accordingly. If you position yourself like, I'm positioning myself to vote for the right person, and that's going to be and I'm going to try and convince everybody else to vote for the right person too. And then together we're all going to make, happy campfire songs and singing campfire, singing Kumbaya and holding hands and stuff like that. Like, ain't going to happen, guys. Right? Ain't going to happen. What's going to happen is more war, more debt, and more separation between the rich and the poor. And I don't mean to be depressing sounding that. It's the situation we now face. So take advantage of it as best you can. When will all this end? When the new money turns off. You're doing a great service for those that have ears to hear. Thank you. Well, thank you, Polygon. I really appreciate you being here. We have 297 people still watching with 312 likes. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I'm going to call it quits at this point. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Share this video. Share, break down, find some of your favorite parts inside of this video. Share it with your friends and family. It's a 2.5 hour long video now that we have broken this down. I get it. It's a lot to sit through. Read the chapters yourself. You have access to it, right? Cantillon's essay on economic theory is free, absolutely free for anybody to go and read it themselves. You can download the PDF and read it at your leisure, right? Cantillon's essay on economic theory. There is a link down in the description. You can click on that link to learn how to spell Cantillon's essay on economic theory properly. But by following that link, I will get a little commission if you actually purchase the essay off of Amazon. If you do not purchase the essay off of Amazon, anything that you put in your cart for the next 24 hours after clicking on that link, I will also get a little commission for. So you can support the Uneducated Economist simply by doing the same purchases you would always do. Just follow that affiliate link first, and I will get the commissions for those purchases that you make. And thank you, everybody who has done the super chats. I really appreciate that. Did I miss any super chats? I'm sorry, guys, if I had. Let me cruise back up here and see what the last super chat was. Wow, look at all these comments. Thank you, everybody, for commenting. Where are the super chats? Did I miss them? It seems like I missed a super chat back there. Hold on one second, guys. Let me see if I can find it. Oops. No. Bummer. It seems like there's a $10 super chat back there somewhere, but I cannot find it. I am so sorry to whoever had sent that to me. I really appreciate the support through the super chats and everything else, and I'm sorry I missed that. I was going to go back and check it out, but now my phone doesn't want to go and click on the super chats. All right. I've been here long. No, thank you. All right. But you guys are awesome for that. Whoever sent the super chat, if you had a question or something within that, maybe email me the question and I will try to cover it in a future video. I don't want to, deny you guys when you send the super chat to just pass them up. I really appreciate it, and I really want to take it into consideration, whatever it is you had to say. But right now my phone does not. It clicks off. It clicks off. Dang, and it won't scroll all the way back up to the last ones. No, let's see. No, I want... Yeah. All right, well, whatever. Every time I click on the super chat button to go to all the super chat messages, it just shuts the app down. So I apologize to that. I am so sorry. I really do appreciate all the support and everything you guys have ever done for the Uneducated Economist. I've been getting Cash App tips and PayPal tips and Venmo tips, and that sort of support, that's really what keeps me from taking sponsorships. That's what really does it for me, guys, is because when I see those things coming in, to me, that's you trying to sponsor the channel. And by you sponsoring the channel, I don't have to go and seek out some corporation to try and spread their message or spread their, their product or whatever so that I can make a few extra dollars here on YouTube. People who work YouTube at this sort of level take sponsors. They take a lot of them and they make a lot of money. Like, guys, you wouldn't believe how much money I'm offered to do sponsorships. It's unreal. It's like, it's a lot, right? It's a lot. And a lot of times it's frustrating to me to not take it. Like, I'm sitting there thinking, man, I'm trying to figure out a way to make the most out of my time, to be the best for my family, to, be able to provide for them with the most abundance and all that. And I see these sponsorships and I deny, I deny them. Right? And I'm thinking, man, that's where all of it's at. That's where all the YouTubers are making their money. Right? That's where they make, like, the guys who are driving, 5 nice cars and have fancy houses and showing it all off on YouTube and stuff like that. That's the way they're doing it. I'm not doing it that way. You guys are doing it. You guys sponsor the channel, and that keeps me free and independent of that, of taking those sponsorships. And I'm really considering it, like taking a sponsorship. I was talking with George's assistant, Josh, a couple of weeks ago, who was telling me, it was just like, dude, you could probably double your YouTube income by taking a sponsorship, and you probably would only have to do 1 or 2, 3 videos a month. And I'm thinking, I do a video every single day, and if I took 3 out of the 30 videos I do a month and do a sponsorship for it, how it could possibly change the amount of income that I'm bringing in. And I have to, I literally struggle with this idea. Because I want to be free and independent thought, keep this channel in this sort of mindset. Okay. All right, you guys, I really appreciate everything, but I'm going to call it quits. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.